I want to also thank Ken for his efforts in planning this entire multifaceted program today. There's a lot to learn from and a lot to enjoy. So all that credit goes to Ken for putting this program together. I also want to give a warm welcome, seconding Ken, for all our attendees and participants today. I think by your participation, you do serve as advocate and allies for women's career in aerospace. And as you may have noticed, that any registration fees that you paid are going to go for AIAA section STEM events and scholarships. So certainly worth your participation in terms of where those funds are going to go. And as Ken mentioned, we're also doing this program during the month of August, where we celebrate the anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment. And this year is very exciting because it is the 100th anniversary. So, you know, you probably have seen there's been a lot of TV and stuff on the passage of the 19th Amendment. So it was ratified August 18th, 1920. And then it turns out in November 2nd of that year, which would have been the national elections, more than 8 million women across the US voted for the first time in those elections. So now 100 years later, we all have the civic duty and privilege of being able to vote. And I certainly want to encourage everybody to take advantage of that now in honor of our 100th anniversary for women's suffrage and vote on in the national elections on November 3rd, all very important. So I am going to give a short keynote, and then we are going to go into the panel, the first panel, which I'm moderating, and then I'll also be kind of emceeing the program, which has a lot of different facets to it, all very interesting. So I was trying to think of a topic that was related to the theme of women in aerospace and also STEM. And I was reminded that last year, one of the things that I'm involved in, I'm an advisory board member for the Women in Science and Engineering, which is an endowment through Cal State Northridge at the Oviatt Library. And I've been doing this probably, well, I bet for the last 10 years I've been on this board. And so anyway, so we had a research grant related to the subject of, you know, alumni in engineering and sciences and surveying them and to get data that we could use toward the future of ensuring that women both enter engineering and stay in engineering. So I'm going to give a short talk on that. So next slide. So this is the mission of WISE. I did put the website here in case anyone is interested. This endowment was actually started by a professor emeritus, Dr. Bonnie Campbell. She actually was the first woman full-time faculty in the School of Engineering and Science at Cal State Northridge. And she had a long career there. She got then into the administration as one of the vice deans and then retired a number of years ago. And she has always wanted to give back to the engineering career. She's a previous recipient of the SWE Distinguished Educator Award. She actually worked at Aerospace part-time while she was also full-time professor at Cal State Northridge, so very distinguished woman. And so she started this, endowed with actually quite a large endowment through the Oviatt Library, and you'll see the goals here of that WISE Foundation. And then we have an advisory board, of which I said I'm a member, that serves on that. So they have been developing collections of women in engineering. So, and the link there in case you're interested. So that's where some of the funds go to procure things that could be used for research related to women in engineering. We also host a lot of events, couple annually. So things we've done is we usually try to do a mentoring event each year. We do a pie day. We would have just done one this year in March, except for the pandemic. So we'll have to wait and do one next year, but it's kind of a STEM and career networking. So we try to outreach both to STEM K through 12, as well as the college students that are at Cal State Northridge. We also try to encourage and celebrate for women engineering professionals as well too, actually women and science. And we've had some very notable speakers. One of the ones we had earlier, which I think is very familiar to this group, who's a fellow of AIAA, is Dr. Bonnie Dunbar, the former astronaut. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit about the WISE board. And this, what I'm going to talk about is a research grant. The other thing the funds went for last year was to pay for some release time from the faculty that they could do some research. So that's what this project was. So I'm going to present it on behalf of Dr. Ani Naplian and myself. She's in the computer science department at Cal State Northridge. Next slide. So her research question was related to what can we learn from the alumni at Cal State Northridge. So these were all folks who she surveyed. She got a list of people that had graduated from CSUN, women who graduated from CSUN with degrees in engineering. And she put together a set of survey questions and looked at the data. And then she asked also some questions, free-form questions that she got answers from as well too. And the idea was to share this information with both current and future students, and then also trying to use some of the conclusions of the data to say, how could we help for encouraging STEM in the future? And I think you'll see from some of the questions that she asked and the answers that they're all related to how we might help to increase the number and support of women in STEM, not just at CSUN, but more broadly. I think the conclusion she reached, or the data shows things that, quite honestly, I think would be, we'd also find if we were looking at other schools as well. Next slide. So here's the survey questions. I'm not going to go through all these, but just so you kind of see what she did ask. You know, she asked things like, what would you want to change? You know, how important were mentors? How important was research that you did? How important was internships? So it was related to questions, and also in terms of what they are doing now since they graduated. So these are the survey questions that that she used. And if people are interested, this presentation will be posted so you can take a look at it in more detail later. Next slide. So one of the questions that she asked was, is there a particular course or program that you participated in that you would like to highlight that you felt was very instrumental in your success? So 60% of the responses actually cited a person, one of the professors, and I think we do know that many times a professor can serve as a really great mentor for going on in your career. And then 18% of the responses cited a class or a particular set of classes. Sometimes it was a lab class, for example, of something they had done that really got their interest in engineering or science. So that's the aggregate information from that question. Next slide. Then she asked the question, you know, what would you change? What would you have wanted to change, you know, if you could? And so this was kind of the summary. Several of the respondents said they wish there had been more female faculty while they were going to school there at Cal State Northridge. You know, said that there were more seminars and or mentorship. There were some comments related to student clubs, having more research opportunities, and internships. And here's some of the quotes of the things that they felt would have been helpful: to hold women-only workshops, changing class timings, highlighting careers that women can have. And of course, this is one of the goals that we've been doing at through the WISE board, but also organizations such as SWE certainly participate in highlighting, you know, what are all the different careers a woman can have. Talking about obstacles, barriers, discrimination as a group, and just, you know, wishing that there was more focus on on STEM. And I do think that in some of these cases, you know, when they look back, I think it was the last 10 years of grads, right? So it's possible that over that time frame also things have improved, but this is from their experience what they would want to change. Next slide. So another question, did you do research? And if yes, how did that impact your success? So there were 46 respondents to this question, and 20 out of 46 gave a resounding yes of the impact that doing research had. So I think this really foot stomps on the fact that in a lot of the engineering and science programs, you really do want to have some kind of research component, even if it's at the undergraduate level, because those are the type of things that really get people engaged, they get passionate about, and these are the type of things that they remember and hopefully retain and then want to go on and do an engineering career. We do know in engineering schools a lot of times, and this is both true for both men and women, that after say the first year or two, sometimes they do drop out and go to do another major, based on certain things. So anything we can do that encourages them to stay in the program is going to help in the STEM fields. So these were questions as related to what they had done at CSERN related to research. They believe it also contributed not just with the technical, but how to be more confident and proactive. Made me change my entire career plan. I mean, sometimes a research project can do that, right? You get very involved with something, you think, wow, this is the area of engineering or science I want to focus in, because I really believe, from the research I'm doing, that this is what I would want my career to be in. So again, very important point about research. Next slide. Another question they asked was about internships. And of course, I think those of us that are participating in this know how important internships are, both in terms of understanding what career you want to go into, but also helping you then to get that first full-time position as well too, because a lot of companies do look to see what kind of internships students have done. So again, 25 out of 46 said yes, that it played a significant role. CSUN has a co-op program, a lot of universities do. So some of them had participated in that co-op program, and in general, it really related to giving them that boost that they needed in the career that they're currently doing. And you can see, what kind of research out of the respondents they did. Some were related to campus programs, internships, others with faculty, an honors co-op, through a mentor, word of mouth. These were all the things in terms of how did they actually find the internship that they were looking for. And again, you see how mentors and faculty serve a key role in that, in helping people to find internships. Next slide. So student groups. So the other area, so we talked about research, we talked about internships being important to STEM careers. And the third area is to what extent they participated in student groups. And when we go into our panel discussion, you're going to see we're going to talk about how those networking and professional groups continue to contribute to someone's career. And you can see that, again, quite a number of them had participated in various groups. Some of these are specific to CSUN. I love the fact that they said there was a BEER club. I'm sure that was electrical engineering, I think, anyway. But, and also the ones like SWE, Women in Science and Engineering, SHIP, all of those national organizations have student chapters. And so a lot of the universities have that. CSUN is also has a very diverse representation of students and quite a large Latina folks that attend there as well too. So there's a lot of programs and clubs related to that, and specifically to that ethnicity and demographic. So again, student groups, very important, they felt, to the success. So I think those are kind of the three areas they focused on: the internships they had, the research they were able to do while in school, and participating in student body and clubs. Next slide. That might be the last one. Is that the last one? I think
Yeah,
it
that's the
is.
last
Yep.
one.
Okay, thanks, Ken. So anyway, I just, again, wanted a topic that was related to STEM, and because the study had been done through the WISE group with a group of alumna from that were in engineering, I thought it was related to our subject today. And you'll see from the agenda that a lot of the items that Ken has put together really do relate to things that are STEM topics, how to attract students to engineering, how to attract students to the aerospace and defense, the importance of professional societies, certainly AIAA putting on an event like this. So I think there's a lot of connections between things that provide for that STEM impact in universities and then continue to do so, so that people continue their careers in this aerospace and defense industry. So with that, we're about on time with our schedule. I'd like to turn to the panel, Ken,
Okay.
and introduce our panelists. So I am very honored to have the folks that are on this first panel today. A very distinguished set of stellar representatives that are in the aerospace and the defense community. So the plan today is I'm going to introduce them with some information from their bios. So I'm going to introduce each of them to you. Then what we're going to do is we're going to have each of the panelists give a short 2 to 5 minute kind of opening statement related to the subject of the theme of the panel, which is women in careers in the aerospace field. And then in addition, I have sent them some questions to think about, and we will turn to them as well too. As Ken had mentioned, if there's some specific questions people would like to see answered, once we get started in the panel, you can put them in the Q&A and we'll look for those as well too. We're going to try to stay definitely on schedule. This is going to be a meaningful, but we're going to keep to the time. We've got an hour for this panel, and I'll be watching the time overall so that we can get on to ensure there's enough time for the second panel and the rest of everything that's in the program. So in alphabetical order, our panelists are, Chris Acosta, who is a program manager at Northrop Grumman. She's been at Northrop Grumman Corporation since 2003, works in areas of systems engineering, global supply chain, program operations, and program management. Before she joined Northrop, she was at Boeing. She has degrees in material science and engineering, and also a master's in architecture-based enterprise systems engineering from UC San Diego. Chris is very active in Society of Engineers. In fact, has been on the national board. So she's starting a 3-year term as a SWE senator. She's very active in also the SWE Next community, which is the STEM related activities that Society of Women Engineers have. And then she has also been very active in Women in Defense Greater Los Angeles chapter. In fact, she's the past president for WIGLAC. So that's Chris Acosta. Our next panelist is Courtney Best. Courtney's actually going to be moderating a young professionals panel later in the program, but she's also a representative on the panel this morning. She's a systems engineer within space and launch at the Boeing company. She's working on the Starliner commercial crew program, a very important part of our next steps toward lunar and Mars, and also in-orbit testing of satellite payload communications. Courtney's bachelor's degree is in aeronautical and astronautical engineering from Purdue, and she's currently working on a master's in astronautical engineering at USC. Go Trojans. Speaking of internships, Courtney interned at the JPL as a mission systems engineer. I've heard great feedback on the internships that they do there at JPL. She also interned at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center on a mission as well. Our next panelist is Janet Grondin. Janet is currently the Vice President of Defense Systems for Stellar Solutions, which is a women-owned business providing high-impact engineering services to many significant national and international customers, and been around for 25 years. So if you're not familiar with Stellar Solutions, you should certainly look it up. Before she was at Stellar Solutions, she was a former Northrop Grumman director. She also had a very distinguished career in the Air Force. She retired from the Air Force as a colonel with 30 years of experience, worked in a number of missions: navigation, remote sensing, satellite communications, launch, space superiority as well. Her degrees come from in aeronautical engineering from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and she also has a master's in aeronautical engineering from AFIT, the Air Force Institute of Technology, and an MS in strategic studies from Air War College, and an MS in military operation art and science from Air Command and Staff College, so all while she was in the as an officer in the Air Force. Janet is the current president of the Women in Defense Greater Los Angeles chapter, and she's also an executive board member for NDIA, the National Defense Industrial Association. Our next panelist, Dr. Claire Leon. She's currently the director of the graduate program in systems engineering at Loyola Marymount University. And in addition, she does management consulting through her own company, and she has been doing it for both SAIC and Inside Out Learning. Dr. Leon was a member of the Senior Executive Service when she was in the Air Force. She was the director of the Launch Enterprises Directorate. So obviously a very important role in terms of getting successful launches off. She did that job from 2014 and until she went to Loyola. She's actually started her career at Hughes Space and Comm, which became Boeing, worked through increasing responsibilities, system engineering, program management. She is also a member of NCOSI, being a premier systems engineer. She was promoted to vice president of navigation and communication systems at Boeing in 2008. And then when she retired from Boeing in 2013, she was vice president of national programs. Claire's education includes a PhD in executive management from the Drucker School of Business out in Claremont, an MBA from UCLA, and her bachelor's is in mechanical engineering from George Washington University in Washington, DC. And then the final panelist that we have, may be known to some of you because she did a program earlier in the year, is Michelle Rausch. She works at Raytheon Corporation. She's got 30 years of engineering experience. She has worked on multiple product lines to include projects for Missile Defense Agency, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army. And so she looks at the impacts of cost, schedule, and technical performance on acquisition programs, and looking at insight for engineering design vulnerabilities. The other very key part about Michelle's background is she is a self-taught artist with 37 years of experience. And so she combines her technical knowledge along with her artistry to create unique pieces of aerospace subjects. And for those that missed the program, she does have her website that has her artwork that I'm sure you'd be interested to see. Happens to be www.rouch.com. But I think it's a great example of how we all have both left and right side capabilities, and so contribute to her artist side. She's also very involved in STEM activities. She gives back to the community, be involved in Boy Scouts of America, the Kitty Hawk Air Academy, the Big Brothers Big Sisters, and so she has been donating her artwork and raised over $150,000 to support kids interested in aviation. Her degrees come from Wright State University with a degree in electrical engineering, and she's got a master's in information systems engineering from Western International University in Arizona. Michelle is also very active in AIAA. She is the chair for the AIAA Tucson section, and they've earned several first place awards related to STEM activities that they've done. And she's also a member of several of the TCs and integration and outreach committees at AIAA, and also in Arizona, very active in and serving on boards related to the artist community too. She's a Tucson Public Arts Council board member and has served as an artist judge for her district. So welcome to all of our panelists. And what I'd like to go back again and start alphabetically is Chris, I'd like to turn it over to you for an opening statement, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, Ken and Marilee. I'm really excited and proud to be here today. So in the light of the topic of women in engineering, what I thought I'd share was that about 2-3 weeks ago at Northrop Grumman, I actually gave a talk called Why Women Leave Engineering. And we got a lot of interest. And what I did was I leveraged some of the research that's been done by the Society of Women Engineers on why women leave. And 30% of those that were surveyed in that particular study showed that it was organizational climate that was one of the big contributing factors. And so I think one thing that they looked at are what are the values that women have versus men versus our companies. And it's sometimes that disconnect between what's important that drives some of the reasons why women leave. And in that case, women really cited teamwork and work-life balance as a big contributing factor of why they've left engineering, or why they also, what's very important to them in order to stay. And so in my study, what I tried to look at was just to pose the questions to folks, you know, have they felt compelled to leave engineering? And if so, what are things that we can do as a community to keep people interested? And I did share the fact that in my 25 years, I actually spent 5 years in global supply chain. So program management has always been kind of my key goal. And although I love engineering, I felt that having some experience in the business side would make me more effective. And I share this because I actually left engineering. And it took me, I'll say, of the 5 years, 2 years, I loved it. I felt I gained a tremendous experience on the business side. But I will say that I spent the next 3 years trying to get back into engineering because suddenly I was not part of that community. So the community and the connections, the network, I think are so important in order to retain women in our fields, right? Especially aerospace and defense. So that's just something that I thought I'd throw out there as something that people can chew on and we can perhaps discuss further through the panel.
Great, thank you, Chris. Yes, and organizational climate, very, very important, I would agree. Next, we're gonna move to Courtney Bess, please.
Hey, yeah, and I want to say I'm super excited and honored to be on this panel with some very cool women, so happy to be here. I was kind of hoping I can bring a little bit of the perspective of someone who's just gone through, I just graduated from Purdue undergrad a couple of years ago, and of just starting my career of kind of how it's been looking from my perspective of just coming in as a young professional. And I do think that as I look around me, it's amazing how far we've come, because I hear all the stories, I hear about how it used to be in the past. I'm like, yes, we've made great strides. But of course, inevitably, I look around and I'm also like, there's also so much further that we could go. There's definitely so much further we need to go. Some examples I was thinking of, on one hand, I think there were, at my university, there were a lot of really great programs for purposely trying to retain women in engineering roles. They had a lot of SWE activity within the AIAA that I was involved with there. They had a lot of women in engineering kind of pushes and trying to get women in engineering at Purdue to go to local high schools and promote STEM for young women in school. And there were a lot of great pushes for that. I had some women professors that I was always looking up to. But on the other hand, my graduating class of aerospace engineering was only 10% women. And we didn't even lose any women. That was just how many women came in. I think we started a graduating class of about 150 as freshmen. It went down to about 110. And the entire time we had 10 women. It was exciting that we retained them all, but it was like, we need to have more coming in the first place. And the other example I was thinking is when I first started my career here at Boeing, and I came in as a system engineer and kind of doing a rotation program. And my first team was about 10 different system engineers working within this particular product of satellites. And I was incredibly excited because it was my first real professional role out of college, and my team was 6 out of 10 were women, and actually only 2 of us were white. And I was like, this is incredible. I've never experienced this kind of diversity in aerospace engineering before. How did, like, this is the future. This is great. And then I started to take on a little bit less of a system engineering, I guess, design role and more of a test role. And I found myself more on the factory floor working with the actual technicians and on the satellites itself. And it was just completely the opposite. Every single person there was an older white man. And it was like, okay, so I guess we've come far, but not everywhere. It's always going to be a back and forth, and there's always more strides that we can take. So it's interesting to see, I guess, where we think the gaps are and how we want to fill them. But I'm excited to be a part of this.
Thanks, Courtney. We're really glad to have you. And also we're really glad to have your demographic in AIAA and your leadership for the young professionals too. And we look forward to the panel you're going to moderate coming up later today. So next, Janet Grandin.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. You know, I'm very happy and humbled to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to, you know, to interact. So, you know, I thought what I would do this morning is kind of, you know, tell you the story of how I got to where I'm at. I think everybody's story is really important, and it's important to get that out, you know, and let folks know that there's a lot of different ways to get involved in the aerospace community. But, you know, so I grew up in Iowa. I was kind of an all-around kid. You know, I did sports and plays and, you know, everything. I even detasseled corn, and if you never heard about detasseling corn, you have to get at the really tippy top of the corn and pull that little tassel off. And when you do that, you get a lot of bugs, and it's kind of a gross job, right? But it was a job that made me think I probably don't want to do this for the rest of my life, which was really hopeful. My dad was an engineer, and he was an aviator. He built his own plane from blueprints, and, you know, I watched him for years put it together, and then I got a chance to fly in it. So I really caught the bug from him. So kind of that's, you know, an all around kind of start. I went off to Embry-Riddle and that kind of found a home there. And I thought when I went to Embry-Riddle, I thought I'd come out a pilot, and I came out an aeronautical engineer and who didn't want to be a pilot anymore. And so I went into the Air Force thinking I was going to run some wind tunnels or something like that, and got into the Air Force, and the Air Force said, yeah, well, you know, we need you to do space stuff. And which, you know, I was an aeronautical engineer. I was like, I don't know that I want to do space stuff. And now then, you know, 22 years later, I'd spent, you know, most of my career in space. So my point there is I had no idea when I was out detasseling corn and pulling bugs out of my hair at the end of the day that I was going to end up doing what I have done in my career. And I've been so fortunate to get here. And it's really because of the ecosystem. I didn't even know what that word was, you know, years ago, but it's in place, and we're all part of it. And so, you know, helping others to understand that they're, you know, it is a diverse community, you know, to Courtney's point, it's a very diverse community. It's welcoming to women, but you have to connect to be able to see it. It's not necessarily visible to you when you get in. And then you also don't have to pick a path and stay with it, you know, for 20 or 30 years and listen to everybody. You know, Claire and Chris and Courtney's already done different things, and I'm sure we're going to, and of course Marilee has done a bunch of things, and I'm sure we'll hear the same from Michelle. So anyway, I guess my point is, you know, really my hat's off to everybody on the Zoom call today for taking time to kind of learn and connect, because that's how you're going to see these opportunities. And there's just there are opportunities everywhere. So if that's your thing and you like to solve hard problems, you're in the right place. And then we just need to get the word out to other folks to help them understand what it's all about.
Thanks, Janet. Yes, and thank you for your service in the Air Force and your continuing leadership in the aerospace industry. Next up, Claire, Dr. Leon.
Can you hear me okay? Whoa. Okay, I was trying, anyway, I was having trouble with my my comm, so
It's okay now.
so let's see, I started in aerospace kind of maybe by good luck. When I was looking for a job fresh out of college, I was offered a job at General Motors or at a heating and air conditioning company. And then Hughes Aircraft offered me a job, and I thought, what could be better than working in space? So I felt super lucky to be offered a job in California. I was an East Coast kid, so I moved out to the West Coast and started in propulsion, which I really didn't like because I was surrounded by all old white guys. And I didn't feel like I had an affinity group at all. And so in my management, I think I had so much energy and so much drive, and I really wanted to make, get a good start. They didn't know what to do with me. So after 11 months, I transferred to the system test department, which was great because I call it my, my cable dragging days of, hooking up spacecraft and running computers and testing every subsystem and learning a ton. Well, there were not very many women anywhere in Hughes at the time. But what was good was that I was able to get some real hands-on experience very early. And then after a couple years, I ended up transferring to systems engineering. And I really felt like I found my home there. And there I worked with a lot of old white guys, but it was a little different because they really helped me a lot. They were like my mentors, and it was like a personal training program as part of a program office to build a satellite for the Navy. So, so after that, I kind of moved around some. I went from systems engineering and more experience across different subsystems, and then as a lead, and then I became a systems engineering manager, and then a program manager. But what was really helpful, I think, was having jobs in different areas and moving around. And so I really stayed with one company for 34 years, but in the beginning, I kind of had a self-made rotation program, propulsion, test, different jobs in system engineering, from attitude control to telemetry and command to team leadership. So government programs, commercial programs. And then after working in program management for a while, I changed over to line management. And I think that's really important too, because line managers or functional managers who've never worked programs don't understand what programs need, and vice versa. So I think that helped me be much more empathetic with when like running a large organization. I knew what programs needed. I was able to help structure my program and my teams to go help programs. And then after 34 years, I thought, hey, I want to try something new, and I'd really like to figure out if I could help the government in some way. So I retired from Hughes, applied to a senior position in the Air Force, and ran the launch organization. And when I left industry and went to work for government, I thought, I know how the government works. I've worked with government program offices for many years, Air Force, Intel. But when you go work for the government, it is completely different than being a counterpart to the government. So it was a huge education for me. I learned what acquisition was or is, and how you need to be super careful. There's an article out right now about, and maybe it's not appropriate to bring it up, but Doug Lavero and Boeing and some inappropriate behavior, and every person in acquisition is at risk of something like that happening. So if you don't know about it, you can go read up on it. But anyway, the government makes sure you're super well trained, you're making big decisions on big contracts, and it's so important to do it right and not have something go wrong. And then after a few years in the government, I thought I really wanted to be able to retire, teach, and consult. And so I left the Air Force, and I'm now, running the system engineering program at LMU. And it is just a whole nother organizational or another transformation. I think, honestly, I think academia is one of the most biased areas that I've ever worked in. And the difference there is I'm not an academic. I'm never going to be an academic, but I'm running an academic organization. And so the there's just complete, I think, lack of empathy from the tenure track faculty to the clinical faculty. And so it's really interesting to me, but maybe a little disappointing that it's not a little more integrated. So anyway, I've had a great career. I'm really proud of being able to work, industry, government, academia. I still feel like there's, okay, now what's next? And so I'm still kind of trying to figure out how can I contribute in some way, whether it's through a mix of teaching and consulting and volunteering, or possibly going back to a full-time regular job again. So anyway, we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Claire. And also thank you for all that you do for NCOSE and NCOSE LA. I know we have hosted several mini conferences and events there at Loyola, great location there to do that. And with your support to the organization, really important as well too. So thank you for that. And then Michelle Roush, over to you.
Thank you very much. This is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity, Marilee and Ken, for this, and being surrounded by these great women. How I want to approach this is that it is an interesting where we all have come from and how we all have overcome these hurdles and breaking barriers and continue to stay strong. We all overcome some type of barriers in our life, whether it is physical, financial, emotional, mental, or right now a combination of all of these. Some people have avoided problems and they ignore it and they think it's going to go away. And there are some people that they just run the other direction, and probably because they're afraid. What the right thing to do is, which is the hardest thing to do, is to head straight towards the problem and try to fix it. Try to fix that and have a solution to it. Now, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. Who is Michelle Roush? I'm an energetic person who is comfortable in my own skin. I don't mind admitting that I'm wrong. I love a challenge, of course, trying to engineer solutions like we're trying to figure out this pandemic. We need to find an engineering solution to meet face to face. I would have loved to meet you all face to face and have a whole room full of people. But we have to figure it out how to stay safe. I wear many hats during the day. I'm an engineer. I'm a union president. I'm an AIAA Tucson section chair, mom, a wife, and a professional aerospace artist. Then I perform strategic planning in all of these worlds, my engineering world, my union world, Tucson section, and my art world. Now, what I do during the day job, in my organization, we just have like 15 engineers, and I work for the government at Raytheon. We are limited in resources and we have a hiring freeze, and so you can understand that limitation. I'm the subject matter expert in those fields, and they rely on me to lead them, advise them, and we perform surveillance, we navigate, and we try to make sure we adhere to the policies and standards. Everything I do, I provide a continuous closed loop communication between myself and all these organizations that I manage. Communication is the key, but one needs to understand they always have to exercise good active listening skills. We remember always to be good active listeners, and we have to be professional and polite, even if we disagree. As a union president, I represent 155 employees within my organization. Communicate, motivate, guide, and hopefully we organize to the level of finding solutions between management and individuals before they get out of hand. I perform duties much like a director from human resource, overseeing the morale and welfare of employees. One of the career fields that I like to share with you is my artist side. It is my greatest outlet. I use my art as a communication tool to share a sliver of history. Let's say it's aviation history or space history. And sometimes they compose of a very traditional scene, like a P-51 Old Crow heading into battle, or my favorite, which is right next to me, it's called Spacewalk. This is the artwork that depicts the moment in time where Apollo 15 mission and its astronaut Al Worden does his spacewalk. It depicts a dramatic interpretation of the first deep space EVA spacewalk. Unfortunately, during the Apollo 15 mission, the only photo that was seen and that had clarity was a picture of Al Worden's backside. He wasn't too happy. So as an engineer, I collect the facts, like we were talking about, the details and research, very important. Collect the facts. And I worked with the astronaut, Al Worden, in understanding his experience to really feel the moment. And this artwork is Al Worden's first cameo shot. And it's for me very enriching. Also, some of my artwork has drifted a little bit more whimsical, and Ken knows those very well. One of them I've done is everybody knows the Leonardo da Vinci famous painting, Mona Lisa. So I was inspired to make Astro Mona on Mars and try to encourage people to think about Mars. Another inspiration came when I was listening to the evening news, and they were talking about the space race between Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, and they said the word space vacation. Of course, I did my research with all my friends to ask them what does their vacation in space look like, and what came out after a whole week of research, I created a very strange artwork, and I have a photo here. It is Jeff Bezos surfing, so I have artistic license, surfing on his Blue Origin in space, and it's looking a little strange, and the AIAA Tucson section we made a 8-foot banner, and we showed it at Phoenix and Tucson Comic-Con, and we had an art station to ask people what do they think their spaceship looks like. So we had a really great way to communicate with the public. Thank you very much. Looking forward to the rest.
That's so creative. Thanks for sharing that artwork with us. I see that Alan has his hand raised. Alan, if you could put your question or comment in the Q&A now, and then we'll get to it. What I'd like to do is first start though with the question that I had asked the panelists to think about. Since this is about aerospace careers, I asked them to think about say one aspect that motivated them most about selecting and then staying, because across our panelists, as you can see, while people have changed companies or jobs, they have stayed in this industry. And what was that key factor or driver for you that motivated you and then caused you to stay in the aerospace industry? So any of our panelists who want to start with that question?
I can start. I don't think I always knew that I was going to stay in aerospace, and aerospace cycles. So you have, the buildup, and then you have the crash. And I actually, when I got my MBA, it was specifically because I was worried that aerospace was going to cycle, and it was going to be important to have other skills. And then you say, why did I stay? Well, one thing that happened, I was nominated for an award by Women in Aerospace. And it was, for outstanding contribution or something like that. And they flew me back east. It was a big deal. And I knew I was going to have to give an acceptance speech. I remember jogging and putting this acceptance speech together. But it was very profound that, given what I had done, it was in 1993, so I had, only about 14 years of experience. It was like, I could make aerospace my career forever. And it kind of stuck. It's really funny, but I think to some level, this is one of the things that I think is important about organizations, is taking the time to recognize people, and so you don't feel like you're just anybody. You feel like, oh, I was recognized. And I think organizations like AIAA and SWE, Women in Aerospace, when they take the time to select somebody, it can be a big impact on somebody's career. Now, of course, I happen to love aerospace, and so I stayed for that reason too. And then I also stayed because of the people. And I think the hardest thing about retiring out of Boeing and even leaving the Air Force was the people, because you don't really leave them forever, but because you stay in touch, but you get very, very attached. So I think there's a combination of reasons, but I do remember distinct milestones along the way.
Thanks, Claire. I want to footstep on her point about recognizing people for awards. I know one thing that I've always done, I've done it for AIAA, for SWE, for other organizations as well, is when I see someone that should be recognized, and I'm always looking at criteria for awards and trying to think who might be able to be nominated either within my company or actually outside in professional groups. And so I think that's one thing that we all should focus on, because I do think that is what causes folks to really want to stay within a community when they feel that they do get feedback for all the great stuff that they've done and get recognized for that. And as we all know that people, no one's going to be a recipient of an award unless they're nominated. So that's quite important. Others on the panel in terms of key factors for either entering or motivated to stay in this industry.
Yeah, I'd like to take a stab at it. So I have 20 years with the aerospace industry and also a total of 31 years working for the government. What motivated me really to stay with the government is, honestly, it's the benefits. The salary may be lower and from industry, but if you calculate all the benefits, you work hard and you pretty much have a safe way to earn your income, and it really feels good. Now my son is in the Navy, and it really motivates me to I felt this way all along when I had worked for the military since co-oping when I was in college. So, and then afterwards I had an internship with the Army, and working and being the eyes and ears for the military men and women, and also to ensure that we have an independent look at the acquisition space and missile programs I oversee. So that's what motivates me.
Yeah, I'd be happy to add on to that as well. I think, yeah, there's great benefits, I think, in the, you're right on as far as, where you can go. But in my opinion, I like solving problems, and I like solving complex problems across multiple disciplines. So I guess that's the definition of an engineer, systems engineer. But kind of, Michelle, your whole entry into the artistic realm is so important, because I still think in space and in aviation, but maybe more in space, we're still exploring so many things. You have to visualize the future. You have to connect things. And so I like the people. I love the people. But what I really love is I love the opportunity to solve new problems, things that I've never even thought about. And that's kind of happened to me throughout my career. At every turn, it's like, well, you want to try this program over here, or you want to do something else new. And it always looked like, well, that looks like a fun problem to solve, so let me have at it. And I love that about our industry. Seems to be ever expanding.
Courtney, what motivated you to go into engineering at Purdue?
I feel like my answer is just too not deep enough, but I genuinely just thought it was cool. And that's, I think, what keeps me in it every day, is that I think that I'm a huge space nerd. And so whenever I was doing my problems at Purdue, I was doing my aerospace homework, and I'd be looking at my friends' homework of their other disciplines of engineering or non-engineering. And my problem is like, you're designing a 2-stage rocket to go to Mars. At what point is the stage going to change, or at what point, how much propellant goes in each one to maximize the efficiency? And my friend's problem in mechanical engineering is you've got a wheel turning, how just not as exciting. I'm like, wow, I want this stuff that's flying. I think space is the future. I don't know why anyone would be excited about anything else. But I think maybe less on an aerospace side and more on an engineering side. What brought me to engineering in the first place when I started college was actually a class I had in high school. And I think it's just incredibly important that, like, I was so lucky to have that opportunity, because I don't think it's very common to have like an engineering type class in high school. But my high school did have like a project lead the way. They had a couple of those classes, and so that was what actually got me interested in engineering in the first place, is that I got the opportunity to do a circuits class and to do like basically a CAD class. And I thought, this is so cool. It's like, it was kind of like the solving problems. It was kind of like creating art, but in like a useful, like solving problems way. And it just hooked me immediately. And if I didn't have those experiences in high school, I think it would have been much less likely that I ended up in engineering in college, because if you don't have like that exposure, it's just like engineering is just as far off, like I don't know what that is kind of thing. I would have probably gone into something that I was familiar with. Like I was really good at history and writing, so I could have just like easily gone into that if I didn't know engineering and know that I already liked it. So I think that was important.
Thinking it's cool is a great answer. So thank you. And actually coming up later in the program where they're going to be talking about things that AIAA does within STEM as well, to your point about showing what can be done. And a lot of times in high school, people don't know that. Chris, you've had a lot of different jobs at Northrop, but certainly have stayed in the aerospace and defense industry. What factor has been important to you about that?
I think it absolutely is the mission, right? Maybe had I really thought about it, maybe I should have gone into the service, but I didn't. I took the industry route, and what I think has been so amazing is I've been able to work on, I started at Boeing and I was able to work thermal protection systems for the space shuttle. And that was just so amazing. And the people were just the greatest group of folks that I was privileged to work with. But then it translated, and I went to work on manned aircraft. I recently worked the ground-based strategic defense, and now I'm in the restricted space area. And so it's been the flexibility within A&D that to me has just been exciting. You know, it never ceases to provide you with challenges.
Great, thanks. We'll get to some of the questions that folks have online, but I want to ask one other one, because we have a lot, as you heard the intros I made, we have people that in addition to, you know, full-time day jobs, families, also have committed to giving time to a lot of professional or networking organizations. So I would like to have folks on the committee talk about that, and you know, what has the role of both the networking and professional groups in career development, how do you feel that is really important? And that could be internal women focused support networks, it could be external organizations, certainly activities within AIAA who sponsored this program, but I'd like to have the panelists talk about organizations and what's that meant to them in terms of their careers in the aerospace industry. Chris, you want to start?
Sure. You know, as you mentioned, right, I'm very active in the Society of Women Engineers, but also Women in Defense, Greater Los Angeles chapter. And I like it because it's both engineering and there's business on all fronts. But, you know, I think what's really important is creating that network of people that, you know, you can go to, you can share your issues. As I said, I you know, took a spell out of engineering, and the way I got back in, because there were times where I was really discouraged, was relying on my network. You know, I talked to people and said, you know, should I stay at my company? Should I try something different? And having people that I could share my concerns and issues with was just so, so helpful, and really kept me motivated, right? Because they're like, well, maybe that's just not the right thing for you, and you keep trying. And literally, you know, when I thought, okay, maybe I'm not going to go back into engineering, it literally through, again, some connections, I landed with what was my ideal job, and I'm back in program management and in the restricted space. The challenges are just incredible, and I just think that those are the types of things that keep me hooked.
Michelle,
Marilyn,
you're very, you're very involved with AIAA in Tucson. Do you want to comment on the impact of that, you believe, from a career perspective?
Well, I would be happy to share that. Thank you very much, Marlene. So, like Marilee had said, that AIAA in Tucson section is very much involved. And I joined that organization around 2009. And that organization has the right balance to network and grow professionally. But it is all dependent on the volunteers of the section, of the local section. So those folks embraced me, and with that, took me on, and we were able to develop a lot of things. They had been strong before I joined, and I really enjoy working with them. The Tucson section not only has a long-standing of volunteers, both men and women, in role models, but the VP at Raytheon supports and encourages AIAA to get involved. So it's really the upper leadership all the way down to the lowest level for new engineers that join us. And a young man, he joined us just a couple years ago, and we said, would you like to be the young professional chair? And he wasn't sure. And I said, why not? Figure it out. And he took it on. So we encourage people to take a risk, make mistakes, understand that you're learning. We give them a budget and we figure it out. And we enjoy the networking, we enjoy the camaraderie, and we don't mind taking risks.
Thanks, Michelle. Courtney, maybe you could also add on about the Young Professionals program that you're involved with AIAA as well, too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, kind of as an early career professional, having things like the AIAA and these types of organizations definitely help you kind of to build a community with other aerospace professionals in the area. Kind of like, I'm displaced, I'm coming from Indiana, I've never lived on the West Coast before. Coming out here and having like nothing, no kind of structure or organization around me that I know of, having the AIAA is kind of like, okay, these are some people that I can meet, some people I can network, some people I can trust in, is definitely helpful. And I think, honestly, one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to stay involved in the AIAA past college, because I was pretty involved back at Purdue with the AIAA, and I really think that I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now in my career if it weren't for AIAA, because they're within kind of the university section of AIAA, there's definitely a bunch of like competitions and organized competitions and different like technical programs that you can do. And specifically, I was pretty involved in a lot of those, something like the Design, Build, Fly, or they did different like space proposal competitions that I was always doing those every year. And it was definitely directly those, having that kind of stuff on my resume, that 100% gave me the internships I had at NASA. I know that I did my freshman and sophomore year, I did this proposal team where we were writing space proposals to go pick up a sample from Mars, or to go have a space taxi going back and forth with the moon. And then when I got my internship at JPL, it was specifically because I'd done proposal work, and I was doing proposal work at JPL for my internship. And I'm absolutely positive that it was that kind of internship experience that brought me to my next internship, that brought me to my career at Boeing. And so having the AIAA is kind of an outlet for you to get involved in space stuff and get more exposure, I think is just incredibly important for careers. I would encourage anyone to stay involved.
Thanks, Courtney. Janet, one thing that has always impressed me about when I go to the Women in Defense meetings, and Chris had mentioned this, you know, it's really a cross-section of all the different roles that are very important for the supporting that ecosystem. So maybe as the current president, you could talk a little bit about the kind of mission and focus of Women in Defense, and how that really helps kind of across everybody that might be in that defense industry.
Yeah, absolutely, Marley. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, Women in Defense, our chapter is about 100 folks strong. Both Chris and Claire are on the board. Chris is the past president, Claire's our treasurer. But one of the things I really like about Women in Defense is, especially here, we have folks from the aviation area, folks from the space area, a very broad geographic, laydown, right? So we go all the way up to Santa Barbara, Vandenberg area, and down into Orange County. So as a result of that, it's a different mix than what we would normally get, in just an engineering pool. And I love the engineering organizations too. You have to, I guess, pick and choose your time, right? But we have discussions about, marketing folks. Our next president, our vice president right now, she's a marketing person. She's doing a great job of teaching us all. In fact, we were very organized around our in-person events, for example. We were supposed to have an event in August. It's our signature event. We give all, people come, we get our donations at that time of the year. Everything was kind of organized around that one event. Well, of course, we can't have it. And, we kind of, we're kind of figuring out, well, what are we going to do now? And our vice president stepped forward and she said, I'm going to do this. We're going to do virtual events. I'm getting involved. And she just started making it happen. And it's, me as an engineer, program manager, I'm kind of like, yeah, I guess I could do it, but I don't really know how. And she was amazing, and she's getting it done. So we have a lawyer who's our treasurer, and she moderates the Q&A. So, what's nice about that group and why I would recommend, try to get into multiple groups is you start getting that diversity of thought. And that's really where you kind of can tackle some of the bigger problems. So anyway, plug for Women in Defense, but all of these groups are great. And I would say the big thing about what COVID, for example, just solving problems together, you get tighter and you make those connections, they get deeper, and it can happen in the COVID environment. It's just a little bit different.
Claire, from the academic community point of view, I know your students are in the graduate program related to system engineering, but any thoughts related to a focus on professional or networking in the academic community?
So I've actually been spending more time from a mentoring standpoint with the undergraduates. And so for whatever reason, LMU has a group of kids that are super passionate about rockets. And then we've also started a CubeSat program, but we've tried to leverage, AIAA and some people with skills that can help the students, because students are not going to design, even a student built small rocket, they're not going to design it from scratch without a lot of help. So I've been pretty involved with the undergraduates. We're trying to get an AIAA chapter started at LMU. So I've been involved with the students there. I'm the faculty sponsor for a group called LMARS, or Loyola Marymount Aerospace Research Society, but I'm really trying to flip it into an AIAA chapter, because then they get the support of the AIAA group as opposed to just being a student group on campus. With respect to the graduate students, we'd like to include them. If we have an AIAA chapter on campus, we pull them in as well. But so far, there hasn't been too much at the graduate level from an affinity group, because people, by and large, are already working professionals, so they're involved in groups on their own anyway. But I do want to just foot stomp the importance of having an affinity group, and whether it's early career or later career, having this network and so it helps you not feel isolated. It gives you people to talk to and network. I love the idea of even undergraduate students getting into AIAA and having them help find them a job. So you can start motivating kids that way, and internships, and then post graduation, kind of having a built-in network to start is a really great idea. So definitely foot stomp the importance.
Thanks, Claire. I'd like to turn it over now to some questions that we got on chat. One was from Deborah, or related to, Courtney had made the comment that when she got to the factory floor, she didn't see a lot of women and women of color. on the factory floor. And so I do think that there are pockets throughout our industry which are less represented. And I think we would be remiss in this panel if we didn't maybe talk to the reality of that there is, of course, systemic racism across all the various areas that we're in. And I think as individuals, I think so the question is, what could we do to encourage to have a better representation of women and women of color, say in some of these roles, and of course it varies related to schools, industries, but I certainly think in the manufacturing area, and there's such a need in STEM careers, maybe people that aren't necessarily going to go to engineering school, but we have this huge need, especially with digital engineering, for people that smart manufacturing, working on the factory floor. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, but any comments from the panelists of how we can encourage that more in terms of having a more diverse and inclusive and equity related to the number of people that hold those positions? Anyone who'd like to start? I know, Chris, you work in the with some folks in manufacturing there at Northrop Grumman.
Yeah, that's great. I've been really focused on getting more women into the tech fellowship ranks that I hadn't thought about the other end. So Courtney, thanks for kind of bringing that up. I know at Northrop Grumman in the Antelope Valley, we work with that local community to develop technical programs and certificates so that we can have technicians that are going to be able to support our production lines, especially we do our F-35 center fuselage assemblies up there, and we need skilled technicians. I know that I've worked up at NASA Dryden, and some of the technicians that were putting together the electrical wiring were women because they could get their small, slender hands into the fuselage and get those connections where men literally couldn't do it. So I've seen it. I think that emphasizing that there are those types of careers, right, where if you don't need to, you're not interested in the academic path, but you're still interested in putting your hands on these types of systems and helping to build them, is a great emphasis that we probably should put more effort into. Thank you.
Yep, thanks. Anyone else have any thoughts related to that? Michelle at Raytheon, or anything that comes to mind for any of the panelists?
Yeah. I would like to take a stab at it. It does
Sure.
help being a union president, because you get involved with a lot of issues and you start understanding demographically what's happening. We work in a very rich society with multi-rainbow of the human race. I love it. One thing that became obvious was that people really congregate with others who look like themselves. So I challenge everybody who's listening in, if you really want to change the biased behavior, if you really want to change, I'm going to call it covert racism, which is there, start working with people that don't look like you. Understand who they are, get to patient, understand where they're coming from, and then grow that relationship. It takes a while, it takes generations to get to where we should be going. That we still have the conversations today, it's because we didn't face it. We really didn't face it. So it is the best opportunity. We have a great way of networking. We accept the problems and communicate, because that is the key, and understanding what the issues are. The more diverse we are, the better the product will be, as well as a competition. Competition is key too. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I'll foot stomp on that too. I do think in terms of the listening and understanding, to not be silent, right? So to be silent means that we are complicit in not being part of the solution. And I will say that I personally have undertaken to take even more commitment to action and to not be silent in those cases where you think something but don't speak. So I think that's very important. I know Alan's been waiting very patiently to ask a question or a comment. We only got a couple minutes left, but I do want to let him ask his question or his comment. So Alan, over to you. I think Ken's going to unmute you. Alan, are you there? Well,
Yeah, Alan is unmuted. I don't know why he didn't speak up.
okay. Well, you know, in the interest of time, we've only got a couple minutes. I do want to not take time away from our other panel. Alan, certainly feel free to submit your question in the Q&A. It may be something that we could get to on the second panel, or I'll also respond to any of the questions and comments. Sorry we couldn't get to everyone, but I will take a look when we're in our next event and try replying to some of those, as well as some of the panelists too from our panel. If you see one of the questions that has been raised and you'd like to respond to it, feel free to do that as well too. I want to give thanks for the panelists that we've had today. As you can see, they're all stellar representatives of our aerospace and defense community. And certainly if you have other thoughts, you can reach out to any of them. They're also a very active part of our AIAA community. So we are going to turn now to, as Ken had mentioned, we have between the two panels, we have Dr. Swati Saxena, who's going to talk about AIAA membership. This is sponsored by AIAA LALV, so we want to talk a little bit about membership. So Swati, are you available?
Yes, I'm here. Can
Yes,
you all hear me?
welcome. Yes, over to you.
Thank you so much. Okay. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. And my name is Swati Saxena. I currently work at ANSYS. And I'm going to just briefly give you some information about the different AI memberships that are available within the organization and how does that benefit you. So for me, like, I'm a lifetime senior member of AIA and currently also serve as the member of Applied Aerodynamics Technical Committee within the organization and the honors and awards director for our local San Francisco AIA section. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you for this opportunity. There are several types of AIA membership that one can have, and it's not just for professional engineers or who have a technical degree in related to aeronautics and astronautics. There are other types of membership as well. So first of all, why AIA membership? It's as most of you probably already know, AIA is the largest non-profit professional organization for professional students and also educators interested and working in the field of aeronautics and astronautics. So it's a global network of fellow aerospace professionals, engineers, and scientists. If you become a member, there are a lot of benefits that you get as through this organization. First of all, you get access to a humongous amount of technical expertise and technical resources through different forums that AIA hosts throughout the year. So these are technical conferences, and then AIA also publishes a lot of journals that you can have access to at a discounted rate if you are an AIA member. You have access to domain experts and experts in the field working in different industries, academia, and also government agencies. As you can see today as well, we have so many accomplished people from different domains available here for as panelists and for other sessions. So you get access to all those experts. You have, the AIA has a career center where you can look for jobs and in this area, and also look for different opportunities. So that's a pretty good resource that AIA provides you as if you are a member. There is a monthly magazine that AIA publishes called Aerospace America that you have access to if you're a member. You get up-to-date information on what's going on in the field, and also learn about new technologies and what the industry is up to. We have a very active online forum for asking questions, engaging in conversations, and also sharing information called AIA Engage. It's an online platform, and any member can access it, post questions, ask anything related to the field, and get experts' advice and answers on the forum directly. As a AIA member, you also receive a daily email, which I personally really like. The first thing in the morning, I go through that email. It's called Daily Launch, and it gives you a very concise summary of daily events in aerospace world. You don't need to visit, browse the internet or visit different forums. You get it all in your inbox daily as a membership benefit. You get discounted access to AIA forums. As I mentioned before, AIA hosts several forums throughout the year called AIA Aviation, SciTech, and so on. And you have you get discounted access to those forums. And just if you attend one of those forums, your membership dues pay for itself. The discount that you get on the membership on the forum registration fee. There are several local sections of AIA. As I mentioned, I'm part of AIA San Francisco section, and there are other local sections throughout the country, and you can participate in those and be more engaged with the community, and participate in local events and contribute as you want. There are several opportunities to develop your leadership skills. There are several volunteer opportunities that I really like, and you can participate in those. AIA gives national and local awards on an annual basis, and you can as a member, you are eligible for those awards, and if you can nominate someone, or you can be nominated for one of those awards, and those are like really prestigious awards and well recognized in the community. And of course, it's a great way to network with your fellow peers, people working in the same industry, collaborate on different initiatives, projects, and much more. So in nutshell, those are the benefits of the membership. And I wouldn't take too much time, but there are several levels of membership that AIA provides, going from professional, where you hold a degree in science and engineering, to all the way to educators, students, and students. So for educators, there are a lot of benefits to be a AIA member. For student, I would highly encourage you to look into the membership opportunity, because it's very the membership dues are very minimal. It's right now, I think it's $15 for on the annual basis, and you get access to most of the AIA benefits, membership benefits. There is a website, aia.org/membership, where you can get a lot of information about different levels of membership, how you can join AIA, and also you can reach out to AIA via email and phone. That's listed on that web page as well, to get more information. So with that, I've over my allotted time. So if there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to the organizers, sorry, and we would be happy to help. Thank you.
Thanks for that information, Swati, and congrats on your new baby girl as well too. That's great.
Thank you,
Definitely.
Marley.
Yes, yes. Lots of achievements in both your work environment, your education environment, and now in terms of family. So that's all great. And then you can be on panels now for how to try to not balance, because of course we know there's no work-life balance, but how you adjudicate between all of that. So anyway, you'll be
Sure.
expert,
that would be interesting.
Yeah. We're going to turn it over now to our next panel. Courtney Best, who you met at our panel just previously, is going to be the moderator for this panel. So again, another women's career panel, but focusing on, especially on areas related to young professionals. So Courtney, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce your panelists and conduct your panel.
Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started on the Young Professionals Career Panel. I'm really excited to start this panel with you guys. I think we've got some really cool backgrounds, a really diverse group of women and men here to share our experiences in the aerospace industry. So I'm going to get us started with just an introduction of ourselves, and any attendees who are here watching, go ahead and throw any questions that you think of while you're watching, any questions that you want us to kind of have a discussion on, have us answer, throw those into the Q&A, and I'll be keeping an eye on those, and I can start to bring those up as we go along. But I can start us off with a few questions that I've showed to the panelists previously. But I'm going to get us started just with introductions. I'll go through down the list and kind of call us out. When I call you guys, just unmute yourselves and give the brief introduction of who you are, what you do, what your career involvement is in the aerospace industry. And then we'll move on from there into the questions. And I'll go ahead and get the ball rolling with myself. So hi, I'm Courtney. I'll be helping out as a moderator and a panelist today. I just graduated from Purdue about 2 years ago, and I got my aerospace and engineering degree from there in undergrad. And then since then, I've been at Boeing working as a system engineer. I've worked a few different roles within system engineering there. I've hopped around from payload test and working on console for mission. And I hopped over and did some Starliner work. And now I'm actually in flight software doing attitude control systems for satellites. And I think I've been really enjoying my career so far. I got to launch a satellite that I worked on a year ago, and that was just the most exciting thing to me. And I've also been doing graduate school part-time at USC, getting my master's degree in astronautical engineering on the side while I work. So that's where I'm coming from. I'll move it on. Brett, can you give a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Brett Kornick. I'm the Young Professionals Chair for the Los Angeles, Las Vegas section. So that's why I'm represented here on this panel. And I graduated also USC 2016 in chemical engineering, and then I got a material science degree from UCLA in 2018. And so I split time between the two different startups that do materials development for aerospace and defense, and we do some work with the Missile Defense Agency and some of the government prime contractors.
Thanks, Brett. All right, I'll move it on to Jennifer.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Perdigao. I'm actually an aviation attorney, and I went to USC undergrad and Pepperdine Law School, and I do mostly defense work and advisory work with respect to regulations and FARs. That's about it.
Thanks a lot. Oh. All right, I'll move it on to Dr. Sengupta.
Hi, sorry, I was on mute. Hi, nice to be here with everyone. I also USC, my master's, my PhD, aerospace engineering. I spent most of my career working for the space program, first at Boeing on launch vehicles and ComSats, and then at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory on propulsion systems, Mars landing systems, and International Space Station payload. And then I left for the private sector and became an executive at a Hyperloop technology company. And now I am a research professor at USC in astronautics and space technology, and I've co-founded 2 electric aviation companies. And I do a lot of, I'm a pilot as well, so I do a lot of mixing my job with my hobby.
That's awesome. Monica, can you give me the introduction?
Hi, good morning. Thanks again for inviting me on this panel. My name is Monica Maynard, and I work for an LA school district. And what I do there is I'm the teacher on special assignment in charge of science. So I oversee all the science programs. I have a background in geology, and I came into the aerospace industry as a fellow with the Aerospace Corporation, where I do a lot of STEM outreach work. I'm the STEM coordinator there. And so my main focus is to bridge education, K-12 education, and bringing in the next generation of scientists and engineers into STEM fields.
Cool. I'll move on to Roz.
Hi, everybody. It's really great to be here. I'm on the manufacturing side of things, and I actually live, eat, and breathe this industry, and I have 3 generations to me. I work with all of the primes. I'm at LA Gauge Company. We do a lot of satellite stuff, missile stuff, and I have a pretty broad background. I've been doing this for going on about 35 years now in the industry.
Thanks. All right, I'll move on to Sherry.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Hi, I'm Sherry Stooks. I'm a senior member with AIAA, and I'm also a software systems engineer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I work on the future projects designs. It's referred to as TMX for those of you that are in the business and are familiar with that. And my degree is actually in business administration from Cal State Long Beach. But at the time I was going to school, they didn't have such a thing as a computer science degree. And my business degree is in computer systems. And so that would be what they would call a comp sci degree in today's environment. I got hired out of school to work at the Hughes Aircraft Company, and I worked through all the different aerospace companies, always looking for the next challenge, looking for new opportunities, working through networks to get these jobs. And I actually had the privilege of working for Mara Lee for several years at TRW when she took a short absence from the Aerospace Corporation. So that's it.
Thank you. I'll move on to Marilyn.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marilyn, and I have an unusual career in aviation aerospace, if you will. I started off as a marketing advertising major and somehow got thrown into the military. As a civilian, I ended up producing the very first air show at Barbers Point in Hawaii back in the days when Naval Air Station Barbers Point existed. But at that time, I hated to fly. I didn't know anything about airplanes, so you can imagine the challenges of doing an air show in the middle of the Pacific with the Navy Blue Angels. But anyway, after 3 years of doing that, the bug bit. I moved here to the mainland where I could pursue aviation. Again, you know, the thing that I feared the most at one point in time in my life. But I ended up producing an air show on Huntington Beach 23 years ago. After that, I transitioned to the Museum of Flying in Santa Monica as a director. Then I went off and started my own business for 5 years, where I consulted for a lot of aviation museums and air shows and various nonprofits. And then somehow that path led me to the X Prize, where I jumped on board with them as a senior director of operations and ended up overseeing the first Air and Space Expo, where we had lunar lander vehicle competitions. And that was another new world for me. I knew nothing about rockets, but I learned quickly. And now I spend my days in higher education at the University of California, U.S. University, Cal State University, Dominguez Hills, excuse me. But aviation remains a huge part of my life. My other half and I have been fortunate enough to have several biplanes over the years. We have flown them to Oshkosh. I flew in a Great Lakes biplane with my instructor there. And we've had several adventures, cross-country adventures in them. So I'm grateful to still have that as an everyday part of my life. And thank you. And I look forward to being part of this conversation, meeting the others.
Great, thanks. Amanda, can you introduce yourself?
Hi there, my name is Amanda Ireland. So I have my master's and my undergrad from Drexel University in mechanical engineering and mechanics. Down in Florida, I work at the Kennedy Space Center. I work with the Boeing Company as a mission integration and operations engineer for the Boeing Starliner. Most of my job requires me being a launch campaign manager for when we're taking the vehicle from the factory, putting it on the rocket, all the way till we actually get it off the ground. I love my job, get to work with astronauts, and it's get to work with astronauts, the vehicle technicians, get to see a full range of the vehicle operations. Yeah, and I'm really happy to be here. There's a lot of awesome women on the phone.
Thanks, Amanda. All right, Kathleen.
Hi, I am Kathleen Fredette. I am the Director of STEAM Initiatives for iLead Schools. We are public charter, and we use project-based learning and social emotional learning, which is a big word that's becoming more known now about how do we really create effective learners. I never meant to be in aerospace. I was teaching middle school at low income in Palmdale, California, in the Antelope Valley. I applied and was accepted to be one of the first 6 educators that flew on NASA's SOFIA mission. And I, since then, have flown 3 other missions. I got to fly with John Grunsfield once when we were I became a great advocate, and I fell in love with that plane. And it just, you know, how things happen, it just moved me into aerospace. I was getting my degree, my master's in STEM curriculum. For my capstone, I created a project around gliders. Never expected to go into a glider, didn't want to, but wanted to introduce kids to flight. Hey, you should make a video of someone learning how to, you know, speed up, slow down, turn. I'm like, not me. They put me in and we made that video. We did that project again with the goal of really introducing these to kids who don't have the opportunity. Many of us, me included, I never knew what an engineer was. I thought an engineer was someone on a train, to be honest. All that being said, that has moved me now into aerospace. Last year, I had the great privilege of working with retired Major General John Barry to open up a middle school that is adjacent to Centennial Airport in Colorado. It's called Colorado Skies Academy, and it's a middle school. So what we're seeing is that while the high school programs are awesome, if we can begin to inspire kids and give them real authentic opportunities when they're younger to start to explore space and aviation, and then move them through that with mentors and real experiences, maybe we'll have even a better chance to inspire that next generation. So I'm hoping, I'd love to see Mojave Skies. I'd love to see that school, and along with high schools, replicated. So now I'm a glider pilot, and I'm pretty entrenched in the whole aerospace. The one other thing I'll say is that we just finished a competition, and we had 2 AIAA assessors on a competition for microgravity experiments. So we run a project where kids learn about microgravity and ISS, write an experiment, and then we've launched so far 8 experiments to ISS, and we have 2 more that are going to be launched. And these are kid-authored experiments. Okay.
Great, thanks. And last but not least, Anne.
Thanks very much, Courtney. So I'm Ann Devereaux. I am the division manager for systems engineering and integration and test at JPL. So we have some other JPL, also an ex-JPLer on the panel. We have about 500 people in my organization that do that top level of a spacecraft and a project. So we're not the people who build the stuff. We are the people who specify the stuff. And then when the stuff comes together, we're the ones that figure out whether we got the right thing before we hit the button. I am not an astro major myself. I started in electrical engineering at MIT. That's my undergrad. And then when I came out, so I wanted to do electrical. I did one term of mechanical, and it was kind of tragic, like the whole balls rolling down inclined planes. Like that still makes my nose bleed. But electrical, I was all over it. I loved electrical. And so when I was graduating, you know, I had a chance to work at electrical sort of companies. And I have always wanted to work for NASA. That's what I wanted to do. And so I took my electrical engineering degree to JPL, and it just so happened they were hiring in the telecom area. And I really liked that. So much like a lot of people here, I did go to USC for my master's degree in telecom. And then I did telecom, building radios and doing radio demonstrations for like 15 years. So I was pretty much entrenched in telecom. That was the thing that I loved to do. But I always loved that big picture sort of view. And I always loved the idea of what is our mission. So we were building telecom hardware for spacecraft, but then I loved the idea of our spacecraft. I'm very much one of those people who anthropomorphize spacecraft. So it's always a she. I don't know why. I guess it's like ships or something. It's always a she. I always resonate with it. You know, people who are doing software. It's like, well, what does she think that she needs to do now? Like, I really think that way. So anyway, so I ended up going into systems. I, at one point, was the lead systems engineer for Curiosity before she landed. And then I started out on 2020, the Perseverance. For the first 5 years, I was the lead spacecraft engineer on that as well, until I moved into line management. And you know, now it's all about how do we do systems better for all of our projects, not just for Mars. So I want to just throw out something to how much I admire the women here who are pilots and women who are in the audience. I was a pilot. My dad was an airline pilot, actually. He's retired. And so I got my private license and I was going for instrument. It turns out I'm a terrible pilot though. And the reason is, I think I tend to Kobayashi Maru myself through all situations, if anybody gets the old Star Trek reference. And where I was flying was at Burbank Airport, which is a fairly high level airport. It's no LAX, but you have, you know, 757s coming in and whatever, and you really need to be predictable. And it's just not my nature. And so I decided before I have a terrible accident, I should quit. And so, like I said, I really admire the people that have that discipline and that drive to keep flying. It's something that, you know, I loved from a kid, and I appreciate people doing it now. So I too am happy to be on this panel. Thank you very much, Courtney.
Thanks, Anne. Now I'm really excited about this panel. I think we have a really cool group of backgrounds. We've got engineers, but we've also got educators, and we've got pilots, and we've got enthusiasts. And so I think this will be a really great panel. I'm going to start off with a question that I think really ties a lot of the theme together. Start off strong. What progress have you guys seen being made in diversity inclusion in the aerospace industry? And also, where do you think the gaps are? Where do you think we're being held back?
I might volunteer just because part of my job is recruiting, and how we've been thinking about it, and especially as a woman, and seeing, you know, how our recruiting efforts can be helped. I hate to say we've come a long way, but we have come a long way for the folks who, you know, started out, you know, years ago. You know, there wasn't even a computer science degree at one time. Certainly when I started, and even, you know, up to a few years ago, I could easily be the only woman in a group of 30 or 40 guys. I used to hesitate to wear a regular suit, like a woman's suit with a skirt, because I would be the only one showing skin, and that seemed weird to me. I mean, I've kind of gotten over it. I think that at least at JPL, one of the things that we're really trying to do is get off of the usual kind of majors and schools and tracks with kind of the usual people, because there is, schools are trying to be more diverse, obviously, but there's a lot of people that are going to really good state schools, in different places, people who are getting sort of non-standard degrees. And we've been trying to think more about a diversity of experience. So not just going to, the high-end schools, not just getting people who have, the full-on Aero-Astra degrees, but trying to get people from all, the people that you see here are coming from all sorts of backgrounds. And I think we're trying to go down the route that if you look for people of different backgrounds, from different sorts of experiences, from different sorts of communities, that helps you get that diverse set of folks working for you, as opposed to, trying to, which I'm sure people could resonate with. It kind of feels weird to be like, oh, well, I need my one person of color and I need my 2 women, and now I'm done. I have 2 women and a person of color to try not to be that way. But I think it's a struggle. I feel like this is probably one of the few times I've seen this many women talking about aerospace at one time. And certainly I think one of the key things is the more diverse people we have in leadership positions, then I find that women and people from other communities are more likely to come talk to me about jobs than they might have been, if I had been kind of your standard old aerospace engineer. And so I think, that doesn't feel really, really right. But I think that people like us have a little bit more empathy for where people are coming from. And so we can help build that diversity.
I would probably, this is kind of ironic, I literally did an interview on the topic of how to get more women in aerospace yesterday with Bloomberg. And so I did a little bit of research ahead of time to get the statistics. And it's about 15% women in aerospace. I don't know whether, I assume they include space as well as aviation in the aerospace number. And in terms of how that's changed over the past 20 years, it really hasn't. So I think we have a long way to go to actually increase that number. That being said, there are organizations like NASA and JPL who do a really good job when it comes to recruiting to have more women, but there are so many companies in the private sector that don't. And I also spent 2 years in the tech sector, and everybody's probably heard the term bro culture. And so a lot of those startup companies, those small environments, are actually pretty bad when it comes to diversity. So I think there's a lot more that needs to happen. I think there has to be a bottoms up and a top down approach. So bottoms up, starting in high school, getting girls into the pipeline, early career, mid-career, having women stay in the field, because I have a lot of colleagues who's actually left. And then, of course, having executive level leadership, C-suite level, as well as everything in between, is the key. But I think we do, unfortunately, have a long way to go when you look at statistics.
I have something to add too. So in the industry, especially we see it largely in Florida. I used to actually live in LA. I used to come to the meetings there. So a little different location, just changed down here about 2 years ago. So, but in the industries, after shuttle ended, most of the workforce has been depleted. So we have a 30-year age gap that we're trying to backfill right now in the industry. If we can put women in those positions, we're gonna be, next 10 years gonna make a big difference to what kind of impact we can have on changing what the industry looks like.
I just want to add on to those great comments already about the gap. And so I think gap has a lot to do with exposure. So a lot of aerospace are, I'll just say it gently, sorted and selected. It's the kids who already are either gifted or already are inspired in some way because they're connected to someone as an engineer. And so how do we create experiences for kids who have no idea of what that horizon is, and to begin to give them experiences? And while I say it's great to have engineer in the classroom, I love that. What we really need is experience, where I'm a kid and I have an opportunity to think like a scientist, think like an engineer, do the things. And so to me, that gap means, how am I going to create projects for kids who normally would have zero accessibility to that and zero interest, because often they're just figuring out, are we gonna have lights on at our house? Are we gonna have food? So giving them those opportunities and helping them to develop mentorship. One of my favorite things is to connect kids with other people. And so I feel so grateful and honored to be talking with you all and go, okay, wait, here's some more women that I could connect other young women to. So that's my thoughts about the gap, is what can we do, and even work below high school, because usually by high school, you've kind of thought about it. And so I'm really targeting these days middle school. So.
Yeah, and I also want to add to what Kathleen is talking about. As an educator, I think that we are advocates for our students, all our students, and but I think society also needs to catch up. And I think companies have come up with programs that involve more students, and I think that's really helpful. And society needs to play a part in that too, so the kids become interested and they see it in the news and they see it on TV and in their shows, and it's not just something that they see in school.
And I just had one thing to add, and the good news is I haven't been called honey or darling or sweetheart in about 15 years, so that's progress. But I've also noticed, in the last 20 years in this industry, that I notice as people start to retire, your stereotypical white 60-something, things just seem to get a little better. That you make a little room for the STEM people that are coming up. You have a new generation. You have children of moms who were engineers and lawyers and doctors, et cetera. And so you're now getting to a point of, in addition to the STEM, you're also becoming, it's a slow societal change, but it is a societal change that we are seeing. About 5 years ago, my flight instructor, of all things, he'd been in the Air Force, and he'd actually worked on a satellite program, but he was looking to become an airline pilot, but didn't know what to do with his career. So of all the people he calls up, and he calls me up for career advice. Well, even 20 years ago, a guy would not have, in that industry, would not have called up a middle-aged woman for career advice. And for me, that was a huge moment, that he would actually think enough of me that he would say, hey, we get together and can I get some career advice? And I was just delighted about that. And he was just thinking, okay, Jennifer's been in the aviation industry for 20 some years. She's got her finger on the pulse of things, so I should ask her for advice. But just even 20 years ago, that would not have happened. And but I've noticed in kind of the next generation, and there are exceptions, but they have the mothers that were professionals, and they're raised in a different environment, and they just show a little more respect. And it's not having a woman boss is not weird. It's not out of the norm. Versus even my age group, they're not quite there yet. But I think just as those people start to get older, retire, and I hate to be cynical, it would be great if we could educate them. And because some of them are great, don't get me wrong. Some of my biggest supporters over the years, my mentor, he's your stereotypical 67-year-old white litigation attorney, but he has been one of my biggest supporters. But that's probably, I would say, more the exception to the rule. And because there was another partner that basically just kept waiting for me to give notice after I got married, he was waiting for me to give notice to, start raising kids. But I'm still here and he's gone. So I think there are societal changes that are happening, and it just takes generations to do it.
I'd like to say that what I've been doing about this problem and getting not just women in the industry, but more people in the industry, because on the manufacturing side of things, where the engineers can invent all these things, great things, but if you don't have people to make them, then you're really in some big trouble. And nowadays, with the tolerances that we have to hold, and everything's just so uniquely made now. It's not like it's just, plus or minus 50 thou. Everything's very difficult now, especially with space and rockets and whatnot. So you have to have talented people. So what I've personally been doing in California, there's Manufacturing Day, and all the junior colleges do this really great event, and many of them do a really great job of enrolling women specifically into the industry. And they bring people from different machine shops to these to Manufacturing Day, and you get to meet these young people and shake their hand and inspire them. And so for me, one way I think to encourage more women to join our industry, which is amazing, is to actually just roll your sleeves up and get your hands in the clay and start meeting these young people and introducing them to what a great career they can have for themselves by being a part of it. I'm an artist. I heard on the first half of this, there were a lot of artists. So, maybe that's a group that we've really got to dig into and go out and meet a little bit more. It seems like artists have that kind of brain, where we're thinking about a little bit of everything. Creativity. This industry certainly calls to have people that are creative and also very smart. But at LA Gauge, where I'm at, we have women, we have female machinists. I've worked at a few organizations where, the metallurgists, the quality engineers, they're women. So women are coming into the industry, like it or not. About, I'd say 70% of the buyers that I speak with on a daily basis are women. So I'm seeing a big upswing. I've been in this industry. My father's, started an aerospace company. So, I grew up in this, and I didn't see any women back then, but I'm certainly seeing them now. So that's what I've got to share.
I just wanted to add to what everybody else is saying. I think another kind of key component is to educate young people early that there are all kinds of careers in the aviation and aerospace world. You don't have to be an engineer. As Roz just mentioned, you can be an artist. We have educators on this call. There's marketing and advertising, there are accountants, there's public relations, there's government affairs. I mean, it's just, the list goes on and on. But, people think of aerospace and aviation of you have to be a pilot or an engineer or something closely related to that. And if that doesn't fit your skill set, what next? So I think, that's also another key component. And great comments from everybody, by the way.
I guess I'd like to add, at JPL, we have a huge diversity and inclusion program like Anne was talking about. And they also have a third element that they're adding in there called equity. And this is to make the playing field more level for women and minority groups. And the example that they use is providing a bicycle. And they have this bicycle that's built for a 6'2", 200-pound man. And if you issue that bike to everybody, that's not going to meet everybody's needs. So what they're trying to do is make accommodations for the smaller people, get them smaller bikes. For people with special needs, get them bikes that accommodate their special needs, like if they need like a wheelchair kind of bike, etc. And so hopefully this will make it more appealing to women in the workforce. We'll have accommodations for schedules, work schedules, where they can take care of children's needs, childcare. So that's just a feature at JPL. I think we're kind of one of the leaders in this industry of diversity, inclusion, and equity.
One thing, Boeing's been pretty awesome about doing a lot of outreach, and we focus locally too. I know Courtney probably knows about what we're doing out in California. Here, I make sure to volunteer at each different age group, and I think that's the big thing. Like, a company may be supporting something, but you as an individual, you have to, if you care about this, you have to be the one that actually goes out and finds those connections and talk to people. So I've been going to Girl Scouts troops, and it's been actually really good virtually because I can go all around the country and talk to them and keep it just really basics. What's a rocket? How do we do it? And then the fact that I'm the one telling them, I think that makes an impact. I've gotten emails from parents saying my kid's been drawing rockets all night after this. And that difference, it's on a very individual level, but I think that's what we need. And then hitting different age groups. There's a program that I found that I sought out that's at the visitor center, in which Title I schools will come in as during their tours, and they do a special education part of it. And then I come in and I give a talk about, hey, I'm here, I'm doing this, and I give them the opportunity to ask very candid questions. There's no cameras, there's no microphones in the room. They have the opportunity to ask me whatever they want. And the questions they ask, they are asking about diversity. They are asking about, I don't want to be an engineer. What else is there? They're really interested in this stuff, and they're interested in how to learn to be smart. I think I know there's this big impact that, hey, if you're from this group, you're not that intelligent. Growing up, I didn't think I was that smart, and I wasn't encouraged to pursue my intelligence. It wasn't until high school that I really dove into it and started thinking about becoming an engineer. So we got to hit all the age groups. And then I didn't think about space until college. I know, Courtney, you were talking about a proposal program. I did something similar called Rascal. I'm not sure if maybe it was the same one, but they bring students out to Florida and they say, hey, here's a bunch of NASA panelists, and they grade the proposals and they do a talk there. And they usually give a tour of the Space Center too, so really connecting to those students. But if we rely on companies to do this work for us, we may be missing this age gap. It may get filled before we get there. It makes me think maybe we need some kind of vector to connect women with these opportunities. Maybe that's where the gap is.
You know, I just want to make a comment. I know we've talked about this, but about that gap, you know, so getting people into the pipeline is important. And like someone said, you know, by high school, they may have already, especially, I mean, there's tons of data, right, that shows that a lot of people drop out of STEM things about high school, even though, like, for example, women, you know, are generally ahead in math before that happens. My sister is an educator. If I'm saying something wrong, please, educators, do not feel bad. I love what you do. I'm just not as versed. But one thing that I thought was interesting, and I'm going to lean on Anita as the stats person, she might know, but I did read something a while back when they've done studies of how many people you need of a different kind of community. So it could be women, it could be people of color, it could be people from different sorts of socioeconomic backgrounds, but it's how many people you need. So you need some, but then there's a set, if you only have one, there can be a problem where that person experienced tokenism, right? You know, because you're the person in the room. I mean, you know, as a younger engineer, you know, not that anybody was worried about having a woman at all, but occasionally it was like, well, here's the girl and we'll put her up and she can talk. And so you have to have a certain number, and I forgot, they've done some studies, and Anita's nodding. They've done some studies, but it's something like 15 or 20% or something, but like you need enough people so it's not just you being the girl or the person of color or the person from a disadvantaged background or whatever. And so it's really important to get, and it can't just be the onesie twosie. I mean, I think Amanda was saying something, we can't rely on companies and stuff. Like, it can't just be the onesie twosies. It has to be where there's enough people. It's like, oh yeah, I'm part of this community. I see people that look like me. I see people who talk like me doing these things. I could do these things. Whereas if, you know, they're just, even me, you know, as a middle-class white woman, you know, a lot of people will look at me and say, well, I'm not her. You know, I didn't go to a fancy school, so obviously I can't do the stuff that she does. Just one thing, somebody had a question about how can we make STEM, how can we have STEM applied to problems that appeal to girls? And I totally get where that question is coming from. At the same time, I'm kind of sad that girls or, you know, people from disadvantaged backgrounds, people, whatever, would think, well, STEM is beyond me because it's this boyish sort of stuff, and so it's not the stuff I'm interested. Like, where does that come from? I know it's true, I just don't know where that comes from.
You know, and first of all, you didn't say anything that was inappropriate for an educator, so bravo. I want to say two things. I really appreciated what Amanda said about getting out there and just figuring out how to make connections. It's about those relationships. And I think it was Janet in the last panel talked about the power of story. And so if I can tell my story, like when someone looks at who I am right now, they don't know that I come from alcoholism, drugs, poverty. They don't know that. So I'm not saying it's that transparent, you share all your guts, but when you're working with kids that come from maybe not that what my four boys came from, because we created that home, the power of story is incredible, especially saying this could be you. So first of all, if any of you want to get connected to some really good STEM projects that are connected for girls and boys, I would love to use you. I'll give you an example real quick. One of our projects, the driving question is, what are the innovation and products we're going to need to colonize Moon and Mars? Now that's a project that's going on all over the place, but the kids learn about entrepreneurism. They have to learn about a problem and they have to create that innovation. Can they 3D print it? Well, all of those skills and mindsets that go into that. Now, if I'm a quote girl, I might think of something that I want in my life, but the beauty of those kind of projects is the kid can make sense of that project based on their own likes and their own passions. So how do we grab a kid, find out what they like, broaden their horizon, and let them do something real, not wait until you're in college. It's just too late. And in our environment right now, with everything is available on Google, we have to create real experiences for kids that are authentic and giving the sense of, I can do this. So if anyone would like to work on any of those projects with me, I could use as many. Yes, so absolutely. Thanks for letting me say all that.
Absolutely, thanks. This has been an awesome, I think, discussion about this question. I'm so glad that this took us so far, and I completely agree with everything everyone's saying. I think of that gap being earlier than just joining the workforce. I know that I had the opportunity to take an engineering class in high school, and I would not have gone into engineering if I hadn't had that opportunity. It would have been so far beyond me. I think I didn't know what engineering was before I took, it was like one of those project lead the way classes in high school. And I know I was mentioning, I think in the last panel, that while I think there have been like a lot of great strides in just having women in engineering in general, I think that there is definitely a gap in the hands-on side, the factory work side, the technician side. And I don't know what necessarily the answer is to solving that one, because I think we are getting some women in engineering, but there is a gap in the technician side. And I sometimes wonder if it stems from just, so much earlier to girls having the opportunity to do hands-on work and kind of the different, and I think that I've been hearing a lot of really great examples of you guys getting in there and with Girl Scouts and with middle schools, and really starting it early and getting girls interested in that kind of work. I think that's hopefully going to start to bridge that gap there. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and bring up another question that I think might sort of apply to some of the Q&A I've seen as well. And kind of what advice would you give to others who are about to start their careers? Kind of what would you have done the same when you were starting out your career, and what would you have done differently?
I'll speak on that since I haven't spoken yet. The first thing I would say is, if you already have a job lined up and you're about to start it, then as soon as you get there, pick a mentor, and that mentor-mentee relationship can just be extremely empowering for both parties. And it's just a great way to, see someone that's gone through everything that you're about to go through. And the information that I've gotten from my mentor, who's my boss right now, has just been invaluable in getting me to where I am now, which is 5 years out of college. Additionally, if you don't have a career yet and you're looking to start one, especially during these times when it's difficult to do in-person career fairs, I know that it's very easy to just look in aerospace at the big aerospace companies, the big primes, the ones that you see news about. And it's because they just have, the most well-known names and the most resources to get themselves out there. But I would recommend that if you're looking for more of a small business or entrepreneurial venture in aerospace, then start going through some of the awards that have been given by the government to small businesses. If you search the Small Business Innovation Research, or SBIR, awards that have been given out the past few years, you can get the names of a lot of very interesting, very cool, smaller companies that are likely hiring and likely need more assistance. So, you know, try not to focus on just the big aerospace companies. While, you know, I'm sure they're fulfilling and great to work for, there's a lot of meaningful work being done on the smaller scale too, that maybe just isn't being found as easily by students coming out of college.
Yeah, I'd love to second that. Thanks, Brett. I just submitted one myself, so hopefully I'll win in a couple of months. And I actually agree. I think what you see represented in this panel is a diversity of experience, and most importantly, people who've been willing to take themselves outside of their comfort zone by moving around to different places in their career. So one of the things that I actually recommend to my mentees is that they try and get as much as the experience as they can in slightly different areas so they can expand that. And so when you work for large entities, that's actually easy to do. Like a place like JPL, you can really move around a lot and get experience all over the place. And even if you work for smaller companies, or when SpaceX used to be small, by definition, you get to be cradle to grave, operating in many different portions of it. So one of the biggest pieces of advice I love to give people is to really take yourself outside of your comfort zone and give yourself a diversity of experience. Maybe every 2 to 3 years, try and do something totally different.
Yeah, and I would back that up as well. In addition to that, getting outside your comfort zone, you're not going to know what you're doing. I mean, you're going to feel completely out of your element. And I think one of the most important things that we have to remember is that we're women, sometimes we are hesitant to ask questions and ask for help. And, you know, some of the greatest help I've had over the years have been from my male advisors. You know, I'm going to take an example of producing air shows. I mean, the first time I had to produce an air show in the middle of the Pacific, I didn't know where to start. I had no idea. I hated airplanes. I didn't know anything about them. And now I was forced into this world of FARs and FAA and all this other stuff and rules and regulations and language I had never heard before. And I reached out to, you know, my counterparts in air shows across the country and just said, how do you start? I went and I visited them, and I've done that throughout my career, and whatever it might be. I've unfortunately sometimes you have to ask the questions, and you can't afraid that people are going to look at you that you should know what you're doing, because none of us always know what we're doing all the time.
I can add to that. If you're looking to get in the industry, right now is challenging because of this COVID business, but so I think a lot of the people that are working at, say, Boeing, Raytheon, and whatnot, you guys can all correct me if I'm wrong, many are working from home. So they're taking very serious precautions to keep everybody safe. They're still working. But the shops are really struggling right now to find people to keep up with our workload. We're essential workers. So I would suggest not just randomly picking a small shop, because, you know, there's a difference between the commercial, the manufacturer, and the manufacturer who's working with components that will be considered essential. So I would say go to the websites of some of the primes and look at the ASL, the approved supplier list. That's a great place to find some shops who are likely considered essential, where business is thriving and we are starving for people. So we need you. And it's a great industry. You make great money. You're treated really well. So that's what I would suggest doing. Also, LinkedIn is a great place. I've utilized LinkedIn as a great tool to connect to senior, representatives of different companies. And actually, these are very nice people in this industry. They're more than willing to reply in a message, answer your question. I have a 24-year-old who's an inspector. And there was a time when he was wondering, should I go into this? Should I go into that? Should I be a mechanical engineer? What should I do? I think he's ending up going into chemistry. But at that moment in life, I let him use my LinkedIn account. I said, go ahead here. I've got 23,000 people that I'm connected to. Ask the chemical engineers, ask them. And he asked questions, and all these people were more than willing to give them so much great advice. So those are some of the things that I would suggest to do.
I just had a comment. I'm sorry, Jennifer, I'll be quick.
No,
I just had a comment, and somebody had a question, something about, stereotypical women's communication styles, and how do we accept them and that sort of thing. One thing I might also say, and it's not just for women, but anybody who's not necessarily of the dominant sort of culture in aerospace, don't expect that if you just are excellent, people are going to notice that you're excellent and they're going to give you things. That could be true. You could get lucky. But people, I think I definitely find, and I did this perhaps when I was younger too, I just think, well, if I'm just really good and and, as far as promotions go or getting different kinds of work, I love the suggestion to move around. Don't expect people will do that for you, no matter how nice everybody seems and they like, oh, I love your work. Are they really going to remember when promotion time comes? Are they really going to remember that you want to do something different? I mean, to some extent, it could behoove them that you stay in the job that you're doing because you're doing a thing that nobody else wants to do and you're doing a great job. So why would they move you? So I think we all have to be, and you can read it in any business journal or whatever, we all have to be very mindful of our own careers and remember that we are our own best advocate, and you need to ask for the promotion, for the different job assignment, for the this, for the that, the other thing, because it's not necessarily just going to come because you're excellent and people will notice that you're excellent.
And actually along those lines, because I know before I made partner, I kept saying, I want to make partner. What do I need to do? This is what I've done. And what is it going to take? And just so you keep that dialogue, even if it's not this year, even if it's too early. And, a lot of other people, they don't make partner because they never ask the question. They're doing everything I do, but they never told anybody, hey, I want to make partner. So they're like, oh, maybe you're just happy doing what you're doing and we'll just leave it at that. And so I totally agree. I think the one thing is, and I do tend to think women do it more, that they fail to ask for what they want. And whereas, you see guys like, hey, can I have a $50,000 raise? And I'm like, okay. You're like, what? And so you have to just realize that it's okay. I mean, they can say no, but you can ask this follow-up question. Well, okay, this is what I want. What do you need to see for me to get there? And so I think that's important. But what I was originally going to say is I think what I would have done more often starting out, in addition to that, is networking. Now, as an attorney, it's a little different because we're networking to build our client base, but also just for new opportunities. And I know a few people mentioned that it's great to have a new opportunity every couple of years, but to really give yourself a wide variety of opportunities, you need to network and you need to have your network together. And then also like when you're bouncing ideas off, and yes, I agree, it's important to ask questions when you don't know the answer, but it's great. And, from a management standpoint, I love when somebody comes to me with a solution rather than another problem. I can find the problems. I can find problems all over the place, but if you can give me a solution, you will be getting a great review, you'll be getting a raise, and I will love you. You should ask a question if it's a legitimate question and you really are stuck. But I see so many people right out of law school that will come to me. So where do I find the statute? Well, you look on Westlaw, you do the research. I need them to try first. You can try, you can fail, and then come to me. But try first. If a question pops in your head, think it through. And then see if you could come with a solution. And maybe even present it, hey, this is what I think, but I just want to run it by you to make sure I'm on the right track, rather than running to somebody every time you have a question. I think it's important to ask the question because spinning your wheels for days and days and days is not productive or helpful. But management loves solutions. And if you can come up with solutions, or even like, hey, this is my interpretation, I just want to run it by you, then they know that you're putting the work in and you're thinking about it. So that's my take on that.
I'd just like to share my advice to young people. They need to think hard about what kind of careers they'd like to get into. And I know even at the intermediate schools, they have job fairs or career fairs. And so that's your opportunity to go around and talk to people and see what you're interested in. And think about what kind of skills, what you're good at. And this is where the mentors come in, Brett. It's always good to have a mentor to bounce your ideas off. Say, I'm thinking about this, what do you think? Are there other skills that you need to get? Be thinking in terms of, I want to do this kind of work, but and I'm good at these things, but I'm not so strong there. So what can I do to improve that area? So it's always a matter of like learning and improving yourself to position yourself for the dream job that you have. And you find that by trying out a lot of different jobs. And sometimes you have to kiss a lot of toads before you find your prince. It's a learning process. And mentors are a big part of that. And like other people have mentioned, the networks. Networks are really, really important.
And just adding on one more thing to that mentor-mentee relationship. As a mentee, be very open to criticism. I feel like in college, most of the criticism we get is by not getting an A. And you get some feedback from your professor, but when you're getting criticism from a mentor or from your boss, it's supposed to make you better. And so be open to it, be accepting of it, and don't be defensive. Just know that they probably know something that you don't yet.
Yeah, and I have one last comment. Of course, taking risks in early career, building that network is really important. But don't forget to also give back to the community. Sometimes when we're down and we have that support system within our communities with the local middle school, the Girl Scouts troop, that really also brings it back to where you started and how you felt. So giving back to the community, I think is also a big part of that when you're starting out.
Thanks, Monica. I'm going to go ahead and start to wrap this up, actually, because we're running towards the end of the time here. I did just want to say, I think it is a tough time right now to be getting into the aerospace industry. If there's any attendees out there that that's kind of where they're at right now. But I think things like the AIAA and stuff like this, if you're called into this panel and you're listening in on this webinar, then congratulations, you're doing the right thing, I think. This kind of stuff is definitely a good way to get involved. It's definitely how I think a lot of us stay involved. So I'm going to pass it back over to Marilee. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in this panel. I think it was an awesome discussion.
Thanks, Courtney, and all the panelists. Yeah, great panel. I was struck by the, the honesty and candidness and warmth and just great advice and counsel and perspectives that all the panelists made. So just so authentic. I want to thank everyone for their input as part of the panel, and thank Courtney for moderating it. At this part of the program, we're going to turn it over to Fred Lawler. He is going to talk about resumes and interview tips. We did have a question earlier related to this, especially as it, results to now that we are in the pandemic and many things are being conducted virtually. People asked about, well, what happens to all the career and hiring that would be happening in the fall? And I do think a lot of the tips that Fred will provide here are equally important, and he may have some comments also related to virtual interviewing as well too. So I think probably a lot of folks know Fred. He's very active with AIAA and STEM, and encouraging all the way from middle to high school to college related to engineering careers. He also is active, comes to several of our NCOSE LA meetings in the Los Angeles area, and again, conducts events where they get hundreds of students and faculty and companies to participate, and just really throws all his passion in this subject. So turning it over to you, Fred.
Thanks. Wow. Awesome, Mary. That was honored. Thank you very much, Ken. I guess I assume I can be here. I can be heard, huh? Thanks for joining this honorable forum on a special anniversary month here. Let me see. I only have an hour. I have over 20 charts, so hopefully we'll be able to get through this. But yes, being able to network and being able to break into or excel in any industry, but particularly aerospace, is certainly important. So I'm going to try and go through that. A little more about me, and talk about the resume. Obviously, a very important document that one has to have. Some job sources, a few interview techniques. This is not necessarily pandemic focused, but I can certainly add to that. And then my contact information is at the end. So if there are questions, you can put them in the chat box and we can try and get those addressed. Ken, next chart would be great. Obviously, everybody's resume is a little bit a function of what background they came from. Mine is on here. I'm not going to go through this in a very much detail, but I mean, I do have a master's degree. I do have a active clearance, and unfortunately, clearances are very much in demand these days. So doing what is necessary and in terms of fairly clean record in terms of being able to get a clearance, and unfortunately, like many things, they're taking a little longer to get. I've been mostly in aerospace. Companies are mentioned there. I am currently at Raytheon right in El Segundo, and I know for a fact that Raytheon, among other of the companies in the area and elsewhere, are very proactive on diversity hiring, and that does continue in this current campaign, and the hiring is ongoing. I've also worked for some of the original equipment manufacturers cited there, also some government consulting, the CETA organizations that are mentioned there, worked for some big companies, small companies. I've done a fair amount of what they call contract to hire. We could talk a little more about that later. CTH is a very good way to get an exposure to a company in the short term, and then hopefully being able to go direct. I've also had the pleasure of attending seminars at some of the companies that build some of the like test equipment, other electronics equipment. They have seminars, after hour stuff, and even lunchtime stuff. Ken, you can flip to the next page, please. I heard there was mention in that honorable panel earlier about networking. Yes, I am fairly networked, and here are some examples of that. Marlene beautifully mentioned, I am active in several of the local societies. Again, these societies are fairly broad, and you don't necessarily have to have a rocket background to join AIAA, for example. NCOSE is a very excellent organization with regard to system engineering if you're interested in doing more big picture kind of stuff. IEEE is obviously very involved in all the embedded electronics that's going on these days. Yeah, I run a couple softball leagues, including one at Raytheon, and it's not a aerospace league, actually. It's I've also done some young professional events and STEM events. Part of that is not only to get more younger people interested in the STEM field, but hopefully to get more volunteers for some of these societies, and also increase membership. Like other big companies, Raytheon has several networking organizations. At the bottom of the page there, we have these TIGs where you can exchange information in various technology specialties. We have these ERGs, of which the softball is one of them. And then Raytheon allows vendors to come, well, in the old pre-pandemic, let vendors come in and actually give lunch and learns, and they would actually spring for lunch. And you get to learn from some new technology or instrument that's out there. Ken, next page, please. As I'm sure most all this honorable group knows, I mean, the resume is a living document. You always strive to keep it current, because you never know when the phone or the email is going to ring asking for a job lead. It needs to highlight accomplishments as they pertain to the job of which you are applying. There's 3 different factors of skills that are mentioned there. The technical skills, I cite on there kind of the cradle to grave aspects of a project, from some initial design analysis, integration tests, sell-off kinds of things to a prime or a customer. Computer tools, there's lots of them out there. Obviously, the Microsoft Office is very important, and the Word, Excel, PowerPoint triad of that is very important. Visio is super great for block diagrams. And then obviously the soft skills, the more human skills, the customer briefings. Lots of companies are outsourcing, subcontracting jobs, manufacturing out to subcontractors. So being able to coordinate with vendors, subcontractors, being part of and proactive in an integrated product team. IPT is huge these days because you're interfacing with lots of different specialties and things. Obviously, it has a reverse, in most cases, a reverse chronological format. So you're starting with the most recent stuff and going backwards. And then the top half of the first page of the resume is not unlike the newspaper. So you want to motivate the reader to keep reading. So above the fold is very interesting, making sure you have enough of a sales pitch for them to keep reading. Ken, you can go on to the next page, please. Chart, please. Many key aspects of a resume that one needs to, if you don't have that, it'd be good to try and baseline that while we're quarantined. It'd be a great time to work on that, polishing it, upgrading it. It needs to include, and I'm going to have an example of mine later. It needs to include your name. And if you go by a surname or a short name or something that would enhance a discussion, especially since everything is online these days, virtual, it would be nice to have a short name that you could interchange with when you're talking to people that may be your future boss. It would be a very good idea to have a version tracking system. I have a simple example there because lots of people are getting lots of resumes. So having your name on there, the version of the resume, different versions of resume are necessary because obviously you update it over time. And secondly, you might be targeting different types of jobs and or different types of industries. So you want to keep track of the different versions that you have. Good, what they call CM or configuration management. I've seen lots of resumes where they're trying to squeeze things onto one page because some career services place that their alma mater told them that they need to keep it to one page. If it's not readable, it doesn't last very long on somebody on the hiring manager's input desk. So it needs to have lots of white space. It needs to be readable. I'm going to go over some more details of that. There are cute little tricks you can do, like using the narrow margin in Word to help with that. If you have a reasonably significant experience and or education, certainly something beyond a bachelor's, going to more than one page, there's nothing wrong with that. You want to be, and that helps make it readable, helps expand some of your areas and allows you to focus in on things. Ken, if we can go to the next page, I'm on chart 6 for those that are following along. Oh boy, I've seen resumes that have the OCR codes on them. I've seen resumes with a fair amount of graphics on them. You know, you're trying to make it a little more pizzazz, which is nice, but in a stack of resumes, the pizzazz isn't going to really count for a whole lot, and more importantly, it's gonna not get ingested into these ATS systems that a lot of companies have these days. So you want something bulleted format with different action words. Again, I have an example of that coming using action words. Problem, action, and result. PAR is a classic example of the type of work that you were involved in, what actions you did, and the results generated. So that's always important. As with PowerPoint charts, we're not dealing with complete sentences. We want to start with the action verbs. Arial 12 font, 12 point is a pretty readable, nice, eye-friendly size. Good crisp font, highly recommended, and certainly is easy to ingest into the ATS. Whether your experience or your education is the most important aspect of the job that you're applying for, needs to be, again, above the fold on the resume on the top page. and that's what you're going to plug. And that would be right under the skills section that we're going to talk about next. So whether you, and again, some of you have some of both, most likely the experience would be the cards you're going to be playing in the deck. We can go on to chart 7, please. The profile is what comes right under your contact information at the top of the resume. It is your 30-minute elevator pitch, if you will, and it is a quick snapshot of who you are, what your qualifications are in summary, what industries you have experience in, what life cycle aspects you have experience in. Lots of people slant this as to what they're wanting to get, but what you really want to do in this profile is address it to what the company's going to want interest in you based on your qualifications as they match to what their needs are. Obviously, this is going to be at the top of the resume. A lot of people do not have this profile on there, and they just list, you know, I want a job, utilize my BSME degree that I just got. Well, that's wonderful, but that's kind of just indirectly saying that, you know, I'm interested in a job, and you have to target it and focus it to what the company's interested in. This thing should only be a couple lines, highlights again, recent experiences and skills targeted to the rec. This profile thing is what you're going to expand on later in your resume, and again, it should be a short thing. This same profile is the pitch that you should give when there are job fairs. And as with everything else, there are lots of what they call virtual job fairs, where you will have an initial phone video screen with an HR person before you get into a chat room with the hiring manager. We could go on to the next page, chart, please. I'm on chart 8. Yeah, thank you. The profile section also needs to capture where you are in your academic maturation. Nearly graduated, entry level, early career, experienced, giving the reader an idea of where you're coming from. Some key technologies that are mentioned there. Again, as mentioned, I have a slight double E bias, but embedded is what is making everything smart these days, as it enables this thing called the Internet of Things, IoT, which is huge. Digital, RF, packaging, thermal, whatever kinds of things that you bring to the table. Obviously, your latest formal degree should be pitched in this little profile section. And then the industries that you've been in or exposed to, or maybe an industry that you want to get into that's tangential to something you've had. It would be nice to mention that. I mentioned information technology, IT is obviously huge and what makes every company run these days. And there are other industries listed there, and lots of them are getting smarter and leaner, and technology is enhancing all of that. We could go on to page 9, please. The last thing that the profile needs to kind of capture saliently is, and good to have, any management experience. Obviously, key things like Microsoft Project, which many aerospace industry companies live and die by. Cost mentoring, any performance reviews, kinds of things. Tutoring would be excellent. I know at Raytheon, in particular where I work, they are specifically targeting minorities and diversity for their management positions. So obviously having that on your resume, it will certainly get you the next step in the hiring process. Not just with aerospace companies, but lots of other companies are very interested and have to keep track of citizenship. So that needs to be, at least if there's an issue with that, maybe at least referenced briefly in the profile and then expanded further down. And certainly a crisp status of citizenship needs to be explained. You have to be a U.S. citizen to get a security clearance, which is very important. And there are the levels of clearance from left to right are shown on there. Confidential is the lowest level. The top secret SAP stuff is what the highly classified stuff and the technology that allowed us to eliminate bin Laden several years ago, among other things. If you have any certifications, there are lots of societies that help with certification. Professional engineer PE is as with lots of medical stuff, is a state-sponsored thing. There's lots of certs in IT, which is continues to be a huge thing. Also, a reference to diversity, if it's not obvious on the resume or from the name. And I have had the pleasure of talking to people and consulting them about their resumes, and even the gender was not obvious from the top of the resume, and it needs to be. That's where maybe a surname or something that denotes that might be enhancing that. Obviously, any other diversity aspects that you could put on the resume is, at least at the profile, is important. And obviously, any multilingual, bilingual aspects or skills are certainly important, as a lot of companies are dealing internationally. Let me see. Thank you. A question before we go. Yeah, as we go to chart 10, question came up as to yeah, how do you apply to clearances? Well, that's a really good question. First of all, you've got to have a fairly clean background to be able to apply to one, but you have to be working for a company that has authorization from the U.S. government to work on a classified program. So you have to be working for a company that does clearance level work, or an agency that can sponsor you at a company that does clearance level work if you're a contractor. And you have to get that company to sponsor you. So you can't just go to the Department of Defense Security Department and ask for clearance. You have to be able to get hired by the company, and then they have to put you in for a clearance. So yeah, you have to be employed first before that happens. But that is a good question. Thank you. Right under the profile, and again, I will have a humble example of mine coming up here towards later on, is the skills section. Here you want to mention like a one-liner for each of the different, and it's a little more of expanding on that profile. I mentioned the cradle to grave aspects of the typical product development, whether it's aerospace or a utility upgrade or IT upgrade, whatever. PC-based tools, most everybody is very familiar with Microsoft Office Suite. It does not hurt to mention that you have skills in that area. Again, the fact that you're listing these skills does not mean that you're by any stretch an expert in any of these, but you have enough familiarity with it. With a little bit of refresh, you can get up to speed on this stuff, and a lot of companies have background in these areas. Also very important, and I've emphasized in some previous teaching that I've done, is technical writing and documents you've produced. If you were in school and you did lab reports that you presented to the professor, whether it was individual or team, if you worked with customers or subcontractors, vendor specs, briefings, SOW is statement of works, is how contracts get let. Request for proposal or request for quotes, RFQs, is certainly very important. Soft skills, obviously very important. There's, even though we are virtual, soft skills are still important in terms of interfacing with people and negotiating customer briefings. Obviously, for those that have an interest in getting involved in or learning something about computers and how computers are programmed, any computer languages are certainly of interest. So computer language skills are certainly appropriate. Ken, next slide, please. Chart 11. For each, so under the skills, if we're using experience in previous employment as the next area of the resume, then for each employer, you want to list their full name, the location that you worked at, the type of employment you had with them is important, whether it's salary or hourly rate as a contractor. Again, I mentioned CTH before. Lots of companies do contract to hire, partly to help with surges when they're behind and they need extra help. Going the contractor route avoids a lot of the HR stuff that they have to deal with. It usually gets a higher hourly rate, usually without benefits. If you're listing a former employer, it would be nice to make a parenthetical note as to why you left the company, because one does not want to look like that they just jump from job to job. Obviously, if you were a contractor, that certainly partly explains why you may not have been at that company for very long. If you've been at the one employer for a long while, hopefully you have a pleasure of showing some progressive skills, job titles, and that would be great to show on the resume. For the employer, there's lots of companies that are not as well known. What the company produces, what kind of product or service they produce, and how your role and what you did for that company relates to that product or service is a very nice little 1 or 2 liner before you get into your actual roles and responsibilities at that job. Next page, Ken. On chart 12, again, continuing for each employer. Here you're going to expand on what was in the profile and the skills. We're going to use action verbs. I listed a bunch there. There are others that you can mention in terms of how you helped the company succeed in that product or service that you provided. These days, they're wanting to applicants to quantify their accomplishments. And again, in the business world, that may not be that is difficult to do if you're in the business, marketing sector, sales, you know, how many millions of dollars you saved the company or brought in for the company. But other ways of things that you can quantify and numerically identify on the resume is certainly important. I have some examples there. I would only list past employers that are relevant to the job that you're applying to. If you've had several past jobs, you can go back. They normally say like 10 years on a resume. If it was a while ago and maybe you're coming back to the same company, you won't want to mention that you've been there before. That's certainly of interest. But I wouldn't go all the way back to less important jobs that go further back. Ken, next page, please. On 13. Next. Again, if you're plugging education instead of experience, or you're certainly plugging experience, you need to put education on the resume at some point anyway. You want to list your formal degrees. Again, lots of companies will ask for transcripts. So actually, if you cite a degree, please spell it out. They may not be from the US, so you need to make sure you understand, spell out that degree so it can be understood. I would list the 2 most recent degrees, citing the institution and location per degree. If it's recent and or you've got a pretty good GPA, I would cite that. Otherwise, I wouldn't cite GPA. For each of those degrees, I would list some of the specialties that you focused on. Lots of them have electives or senior classes that you took. I'm going to show you some examples of that later on. Electives that you took. A lot of electives have projects or labs associated with them, small group interactions, presentation reports. I would definitely cite that kind of stuff. If at all possible, have copies of that you could put in a portfolio to bring to an interview when we go back to normal interviews, hopefully not too far away. I would also want to notice in the education section any extracurricular stuff that you did. Obviously, I run an annual Marv's Expo, and some of the local college chapters of the societies, for example, AIAA at Cal State Long Beach, come to these my expo, and it's a great way for showing high school kids that they can go to college and learn about a profession and have a society help them, and they can actually become an officer in that college chapter. And that looks, in terms of leadership skills, that looks absolutely dynamite on a resume. We can go to page 14. How am I doing on time here? I'm doing pretty well. So somewhere we've got contact information, the profile, the skills, education or experience, and vice versa. Towards the bottom of the resume, you have an opportunity to show a little more about your well-rounded self. This bottom part of the resume is something that would pique the interest in the normal world. what your potential hiring boss would be interested if you have the pleasure of continuing the interview and you get to go out to lunch with your boss, potential boss, or a potential work colleagues. This is the kind of stuff that they would want to talk about at lunch to find a little more about how well-rounded you are. So again, towards the bottom of the resume, any hands-on hardware, software kinds of things, tools, test equipment that you've had certainly is of interest. Documents that you wrote, again, lots of people that have very advanced degrees, that's under publications. They will list some of their papers that they authored. I think we could expand that a little bit and say other documents that you wrote, again, having some souvenirs of that you could point to at an interview or even show in a virtual interview to show them that you have documents you've been able to write the talk, if you will. Certainly, again, affiliations of societies, that you've been involved in those societies, hopefully become members of those societies. I mentioned several that I'm involved in currently. Relevant hobbies, passions that you like to do that are part of a interest in career pursuit that would be related to the job. Marketing and sales kinds of things that you want to mention there. If you have room on the resume, would certainly, volunteer activities would certainly, again, be of interest. Society stuff, all excellent networking opportunities. Relocation should be referenced on there if you are interested in that. Lots of companies certainly have diverse geographic locations. Some of them can be overseas. If that's something that you're comfortable with and can afford to do in the current part of your life, you might want to mention it's open within domestic US, international stuff. Lots of real good skills come from being able to work with customers on overseas locations, field engineering kinds of things. Obviously, citizenship and clearance that we talked about are also part of what needs to be on the resume. Ken, we can go to chart 15, please. Now here, I have squeezed onto, I want to show you a humble example of the last 10 charts plus that we've talked about. This is the top of a recent version of my resume. Notice I've got a 3-syllable first name, and I don't want people stumbling over that during especially virtual when the audio might be a little more challenging. I'm trying to shorten that to a nice short name. Again, for those that have more complex names, I would highly encourage you to get something. It doesn't have to be legal, but something short that you can use so people can address you in a more friendly fashion, especially when time is limited and you want to get the presenter a comfort level of what. You don't need to pull a full contact address. Obviously, a location is really nice to show on there. A cell phone number, everybody has cell phones these days, that has a very clear voicemail as to indicating to the caller whom they're calling, either a verification of the phone number they've called or a nice clear name of who they've called, so they're leaving a succinct message. And if a company is interested in talking, in setting up a interview, they could email you, but they might likely call you. So having that phone number, again, with no background music or anything, is certainly very important. Obviously, an email address. I'm dating myself a little bit by having a Hotmail, but it's well used. And then lots and lots of people are putting a LinkedIn profile, a URL. So if you want to put that in there, as long as it's as current as the resume is, it might have a photo and some other skill summary and stuff. That's certainly very awesome to have on the resume. Notice right under that, as I foretold, the profile, there's a little synopsis there of where I'm coming from with respect to the job that I'm applying to and the company. Notice I have bolded in certain cases the most latest degree and the clearance, or maybe a citizenship status that would be really definitely indicating there on that profile. Notice the white space on this resume, how easy it is to read. Notice that the profile skills and my experience, since my degree is a little while ago, is all on the top of the fold on the top half of the resume to motivate the reader to keep reading. Skills is summarized. Again, you'll be emphasizing the buzzwords further down, but you're summarizing some of the skills. That top skill line, again, is the typical product or service, cradle to grave, as you mentioned there. PC tools, again, Microsoft Office is mentioned on there. Technical writing, requests for proposals, RFPs is how companies solicit work from state or federal governments. RFPs are very important. CDROLs, contract data requirements lists, are documents that the contractor is expected to provide to the customer in terms of statusing the project. So CDROLs are very important documents that give the customer a very good warm fuzzy that the contract is going along according to plan. So, there's lots of analysis and writing that goes on with CDROLs. Again, I'm at Raytheon. I'm just showing you the format for a employer section of the resume. I have a title on there and responsible for planning and prototype testing. So that, and I mentioned some statistics on that. So that is what the top part of a resume should look like. Notice there's no OCRs, there's no underlining on their significance, and it's just bold and white space Arial 12. Ken, next page. Now, I am, thanks, Ken. I am putting down here some moonlighting I did at ITT Tech, and I'm not putting this down here to show what your education directly should look like, but what I am showing you is some of the class. If you're a recent grad or going for a graduate degree and you've taken some classes, it would be good to list some of those senior level classes. Notice I have done that on here, and the types of skills, technologies that class applied to. Again, when I was teaching at ITT, I emphasized to my students that they do this very kind of further explaining on their classes. Again, if they had souvenirs from reports that they wrote from the classes, have those ready to show at a virtual or on-site interview. There's a fair number of buzzwords on here. I'm sorry about that. If you have senior projects that you've done or master's projects or thesis that you've done, I would definitely cite that as part of this education section, because that's something that you might be leveraging as part of your job pursuit. Notice I also put on there, ITT Tech ended. I indicated I was part-time there, and unfortunately, Uncle Sam closed down that university, and I indicated why. So that's another indication of why something stopped. Otherwise, you might get questions about that during a discussion. Ken, we're on the next page. Chart 17, I think. Again, education. I have indicated my formal degrees. They were a little while ago. We don't need to deal with years. Notice they're very clearly spelled out what the degree is and what the focus of the degree was, especially a graduate degree is very important to know what that's about. In addition to formal education, it behooves people to list other company-sponsored seminars that are related to the job or skills thereof on the resume under, shall we say, an informal education section on the resume. I have listed several there. For example, MATLAB is a big engineering analysis tool that's used a lot, produced by MathWorks. MathWorks has a local LA Orange County office, and they do seminars about their new tools. And in the not too distant past, they were doing hotel lunch seminars and throwing in lunch. So you get a free lunch, you get to learn about a tool that can be useful in a job, and you get to network. So that's wonderful when they have those, hopefully, and a lot of that stuff is going virtual these days. So if you've taken other seminars, you've done some stuff on your own, I would include an informal education aspect of your education section. Clearly, continuing to learn about all the current stuff that's going on in the world, let alone the IT technologies that allow all this virtual meetings to happen, and keeping up on some of the lingo is very important, and education is a key way to do that. So that's certainly a good thing to have current and indicates to a company that you're interested in learning if you want to pursue maybe a tangential career to the one you have. Ken, next page, please. I think we're on chart 18. Here, this is the caboose on the resume, if you will. This is the bottom part of the resume that I mentioned earlier. You can throw in other things to help fill out, say, the second or third page of a resume if you need to do that. And I've listed them here in no particular order, but if you are interested or have experience doing any what I call hands-on stuff, test equipment, and when I was teaching at ITT and previously at DeVry, the students in the engineering classes had labs where they conducted this kind of stuff. Spectrum analyzers, for example, analyzes frequency domain signals, and those things can run over $100,000. So again, some of this stuff is pretty significant. Automated special test equipment is how they set up for doing production runs on multi-boxes in if selling off to customers. Again, publications I mentioned on there. Again, if you've done any graduate work, graduate thesis, definitely cite that, what it was, have a sample of that available. Documentation is certainly, again, part of this publication I mentioned. ICDs is interface control documents, lots of things, lots of technologies are interfacing new stuff to old stuff. So being able to do interface documents is very important these days to make sure everything swims. Lots of companies are taking over smaller companies and having to interface their technology skills, people with the parent buying companies' technology equipment. So interfaces, both human and electronics and software, are all very important. So ICDs are very important things. Again, affiliations don't necessarily have to be a paid member, but at least if you're active, you know about these, you've had some background in some of this stuff, is certainly very important. The AIAA, Air Force Communication Electronics Association, happens to be a very significant society that's tied into the Space and Missile Center up here in El Segundo, where all of the Air Force space acquisition satellites and technologies come from. Again, volunteer work that I mentioned there in the past. Hopefully, maybe some of it's related to some of the skills you talked about. Maybe some of it's just some other passions that you have. Great stuff to talk about. And then again, clearances, citizenship, relocation, if you have to, applicable, needs to be on there. If you have a security clearance, obviously that certainly indicates that you're already a U.S. citizen. So that's kind of killing, addressing two key items in one fell swoop. Again, clearances have to be granted by a company for which you are working. They only last so long, and they do have to be reinstated. So you have to maintain that clean record to get it reinstated. And again, they are taking longer than normal. Next page, Ken. We should have some time for questions at the end. Job leads, even before the pandemic, lots and lots of things were online. The big job boards are listed on there. If you have a clearance, obviously clearance jobs is real important. Lots of HR people and agencies that I talk to mention about job aggregators. Indeed is a pretty popular one. What Indeed does is goes out and grabs, you set up a job agent on the Indeed website, which would include titles and locations that you're targeting for a particular job. And you set that up at a job agent, and Indeed will send you jobs from all these job boards that are online and capture them in a nice little summary email. Depending on the type of titles that you're looking for and locations, you could get more than one email. And again, you can set up those to be happening weekly or daily. And you could spend a fair part of a day going through those, depending on how many of those agents you set up. And again, those links in the job agent email that you get are linking to the requisition at the company's job site. So you're having to bypass going through company, unless you're interested in a specific company, which in case you can cite their careers page for jobs, this is a good way to get exposure to other companies. Some companies may be doing some skills or titles that you're not aware of because you're just focusing in one industry. Glassdoor is another example that obviously in terms of networking and being on social media, LinkedIn is huge with regard to professional networking. You can these are all free. LinkedIn has higher level paid memberships that you can get on your own that allow you to do more significant stuff. Next page, Ken. I have interview techniques. This is somewhat pre-pandemic, but it would still apply. There's lots and lots of jobs out there in spite of things being kind of operating from home. So pre-interview, obviously, if you're interested in a job or a particular type of role of a title, researching the company, find out what they do. When Indeed sends you a job rec, looking for the, looking at the requisition, how the skills that you have match with those on the rec. If you're really interested in the job, you need to tailor your resume to those requisitions. Even if you're doing things virtually, at least being able to dress the part on a Zoom call, and obviously, checking the technology, logistics, whatever, if it's on site or virtual, making sure that things work. A good indication, in addition to finding out a lot of companies are doing panel interviews. So finding out the extent of the panel and what technology is being used. Raytheon's just going with Zoom Gov, which is, I guess, a more secure version of Zoom. We were doing Skype. There's Microsoft has other technologies. Make sure you have your video set up for that. At the interview with virtual online, again, this portfolio that I mentioned a couple times, being able to bring that portfolio or be able to show it off, emphasizing something that's on your resume and having that as a portfolio and even showing it. Again, if it was live, you could show it. Obviously, you're not wanting to show any previous company secrets or trademarks or anything. Certainly engaging in the discussion and asking questions during the interview is certainly very apropos. So it shows that you're interested in the company, the type of tasks that you're going to be doing. All companies, lots of companies are on a contract for a certain period of time. What's the length of that contract? Where are they in the maturity of that contract? Are they just starting the contract? Are they testing, about ready to ship? Gives you some idea of where you'd be coming into that contract. Percent travel when we get back to normal. Getting contact information, business cards, which some people actually still have, so that you can send a thank you note, which is really nice, or at least contact information or any follow-up. Certainly wrapping up and mentioning that you are very interested in the job, and by that, thanking them for it, and certainly asking what the next step is on the interview process is certainly very important. Likely they have, in a lot of companies with federal contracts, they have to go through a certain minimal screening process with a certain number of screening resumes. Again, there could be diversity requirements as part of that. They could be having to look at internal candidates versus external candidates. So you want to differentiate yourself from your competition. Writing a thank you note with the contact information that you hopefully obtained, even if it's just to HR, but more, hopefully HR and some of the people you interviewed with would certainly be of interest. Next page, Ken. For those that may not need update on the resume and would be interested in some related outreach activities, I've listed a few here, things that I'm involved in, and I can certainly connect you with other opportunities if you have a little time while being stuck at home and want to get outreach to some of these organizations and or, again, expand your network. For example, Cal State Long Beach, close by here, has dinners with industries. They were having them on campus a while. They're going to go virtual on some of those. They have speaker talks. Some of the local trade schools, Trade Tech College, for example, has an annual College Palooza. They were having in the spring, right after the unfortunately got cut off by the pandemic. Professional societies, of which I'm several involved in. Lots of them have monthly dinner meetings that they have an invited speaker. Again, there's not usually a meal unless if it's virtual, but they do have speakers. A great chance to network, a great chance to find out about some buzzwords in a technology or industry that you may not have been familiar with. Young professionals, Brett, that happens to be on with us or was on that panel, is the YP chairman of the AIAA LA chapter, doing a great job. I'm helping with some YP stuff we're going to kick off for the fall. I have also spearheaded for the last 8 years right before the last Curiosity Mars rover landed on Mars back in 2012. I've done an annual Mars rover update, which is really has morphed into a JPL, what's going on at JPL update, and invited 15, 20 professional scientists to get together for an afternoon in Redondo Beach in Northrop, and network, show their wares, what they do, what activities they do, where they need volunteers. Hopefully they're wanting to sign up new members. We got the Mars talk. We have STEM outreach stuff. We have straw rockets that that Space and Missile Center provides, wonderful outdoor activities for the younger kids. And the last 2 years, we've also been very fortunate to have the James Webb Space Telescope, which is the amazing Marvel astronomical telescope follow-on to the Hubble telescope, which is on its last legs in orbit. Northrop is the prime contra integrator for the JWST, and that's been in the high bay on campus at what they call Space Park. And we've had the pleasure of seeing that high bay. And for those younger folk that are doing space stuff, to actually see space hardware being assembled with a bunch of people running around in what look like moon suits is very fascinating. And that tour has been sold out the last 2 years. I'm hoping to do it again in spring of next year, partly because, as all of you Mars fanatics may know, the next Mars rover just launched and is landing in an amazing crater on Mars in mid-February. And that will deploy the first extraterrestrial helicopter on its belly. The James Webb Space Telescope also, because of many reasons, the world situation and funding, has been delayed till late next year. So I'm hoping to get another high bay tour of the Webb Telescope. So we're shooting for something in the spring time frame for that expo. We could always use volunteers for that if anybody's interested. It's an all-day event, and volunteers get lunch. Ken, next page. I'm running short on time, and I would imagine there might be some questions. Other STEM outreach stuff is on the next page. If anybody's interested, I happen to have the pleasure of doing some tutoring at Raytheon with the schools mentioned there locally in the South Bay. Obviously, unfortunately, all those schools are having to go virtual for the fall, and those unfortunate underprivileged kids are going to really be suffering. But obviously, the math is a very big thing that I was tutoring there. The Heritage Center is an amazing space museum showing all the Air Force space stuff that they've done in the past at El Segundo. They give tours to local schools and talks. Again, they're virtual, but they are wanting to get some more stuff going for the fall, and I'm working with them to do some STEM outreach stuff for the fall. FIRST is a fancy acronym for the junior high school robotics, a fairly committed both time and finances, and they could use a lot of help with regard to business mentoring, engineering mentoring, and Fuzz happens to be the lead for the FIRST section in the LA area. He also happens to be a manager at Raytheon. So if you're interested in helping with the FIRST competition, they're going to be kicking off things again early in the year, and they have an actual a section showcase, and then they go off to national stuff. Mentorships, there are 2 that I cited there. If anybody's interested in doing some mentorship, mentoring kinds of things, those are contacts listed there. Again, those tend to be STEM oriented. And Ken, on the last page, I'm closing before we go into questions with my contact information. I hope that wasn't too fast. I believe all these charts Ken does such a wonderful job organizing these weekly events. Ken will post these charts, I'm sure, on the website, and we do have some time for questions, which I'll see if I can pull these up on the chart. Let me see. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss. I hope it was meaningful. Is it better to submit a resume along with the cover letter? Well, I didn't talk about cover letters. I don't use cover letters, I will confess, and cover letters are only optional when you do applications, and of course everything is online these days. If you are wanting to tailor a resume to a particular job, and maybe you don't have room or don't have time to update the resume, you could certainly put that in the cover letter. But I think most very busy managers really go right straight to the resume. So I wouldn't, the resume is where the rubber meets the road. So I would not spend a lot of time on a cover letter. Let me see. I had 3 or 4 lines in my profile, and I guess more than a few people were overwhelmed by that. Sorry about that. Let me see. And could evidence race without, well, again, the diversity thing is important. As I mentioned, a lot of companies have responsibilities and aspirations to achieve that. We'd have to talk. We could send me an email and we could talk a little more offline. I could talk. I'd be happy to critique resumes, and would be happy to talk a little more about one-on-one on that. Showing the diversity card, I think on the profile you could say that you have diversity attributes and expand on that later in the resume. Would be one way of handling it without getting too detailed or sidebar. But if it, I think that'd be one way of handling that. Should all the projects or achievements be mentioned on the resume? Well, I think the more recent ones need to be cited on there, particularly if it applies to the most recent thing that you're talking about. If you're playing your education, then projects and achievements related to your education, like a dean's list, would be certainly appropriate. If you're promoting your experience, then certainly some recent projects that you did. Any volunteer stuff that you've done certainly could be mentioned, independent of the experience or the education. And I am unfortunately about out of time. I've done this workshop before and I will probably do it again. Let me see. There was a good question. Internships. Yes, lots of companies are in the fall getting ready for internships for next summer. Yes, and internships unfortunately are not what they were before, because it's a little tougher to bring people on for a short period of time. Hands-on experience. How are companies trying to accomplish online instead of in person? Well, that's a good question. Hopefully next summer things are going to be a lot better, and we'll be resuming internships. Internships that don't require being at an office. Obviously, lots of things can be done unclassified at home. Maybe some unpaid internships would be a way to get a segue into a company, or at least develop a skill set. EDD in California, California's Employment and Development Department, EDD, has lots of local offices that have workshops, seminars, networking kinds of things where you can brush up on some of those skills. But my clock is running. I think we're out of time. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed that. Again, the information charts are in there. Ken, I'll
Hey, Fred.
put it back to you. Yes.
One final question that if you could quickly answer that I saw there that I think is a really interesting one.
Sure.
Amanda had asked, how much skill do you have to have with the tool before you would add it to your resume? Do you have a thought on that?
Marilee, thank you very much for that. That's a very good question. I think, because that's very, I talk about lots of kinds of tools. I think certainly enough that you could talk to what you've done with that tool. a document you produced with Word, a PowerPoint presentation that you did that showed sales for the quarter. You don't have to be an expert in all aspects of the tool, but enough that you can converse about it and talk about it. If they were to ask you a follow-up question about, you know, what do you know about Excel? Do you know about doing Excel scripts? If you could talk to that, if you know something about it, maybe some applications you use that for. But yeah, I think you need to know enough about the tool to be able to talk about it for a minute or two if they ask you a question. Anything you put on your resume, you have to be able to defend. So you can stretch your tooth, but you can't lie. Thanks, Mary. That was a very good question.
And that's very good advice, that you could take a follow-on question or cite some project or MATLAB or whatever it is that you had done with it. So great. Thanks, Fred, for all that very good information. And I know Ken will be posting the charts, but a lot of information related to resumes and interviewing and do's and don'ts. So thank you for that.
No problem. Thanks all. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Yep. The next part of our agenda, we're going to turn to the topic of why do girls, boys, the general public want to go into and stay in aerospace or STEM career. We did have some of our panelists earlier that talked to some of this as well, but leading with perspectives on that is Bill Kelly. He's a senior member of AIAA. He recently retired from Aerojet Rocketdyne. He is also the current treasurer of the Los Angeles, Las Vegas section, and has been very active in AIAA. And he holds a bachelor's from New York University in mechanical engineering and an MSNE, that must be nuclear engineering, from University of Virginia, and a postgraduate certificate in aeronautical and astronautical engineering from UCLA. So he certainly has stayed in the aerospace industry for his whole career, and now is going to talk to us about why individuals, girls, boys, the general public would want to go into the aerospace field. So over to you, Bill.
Thanks, Marilee. Can you hear me? Am I coming through?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. The way I like to characterize my my topic here is you got to say it with the right emphasis. Why would anyone want to become a scientist or an engineer? I mean, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? It's not the easiest curriculum for college. Some people think you have to be a genius just to get through freshman calculus. And, you know, so it hits you hard when you first come out of high school. I remember my freshman chemistry. I think everybody's had a freshman chemistry class where there are 300 kids and there's one guy that controls the whole thing. My freshman chemistry professor was J.D. Gettler, and he gave me the speech. Look to the left and look to the right. Those two people probably won't graduate with you from this curriculum. So I had all of that. So what I'm going to try and do today is get into some personal insights about what led me to be an engineer, what might affect you in your decision, what may have influenced anybody who's listening in their decision to get to be an engineer, and we'll see how many geniuses are out there. Okay, Ken, next slide. All right, that's the usual answers that you tell yourself and that you hear from everybody. I'm smart, so I should be a scientist or an engineer. You know, I like math and I like science. That makes me a scientist or an engineer. I'm good at math and good at science. You probably got to be pretty good at both to get through the curriculum. So, so that impacts you. Here's one that hit me, and you'll hear more about in the coming slides. I like to build things. Everything around us, structures, aircraft, spacecraft, computer programs, they are the things that you build when you come out with an engineering or science curriculum. Sometimes you like to fix things. I like to, not every rocket scientist could fix his car. I'm one of those guys. I bring my car into the shop to let people who know what they're doing repair it. I could probably tell this guy why it worked so much that he would start to throw up, but he's much better at fixing things than I could be. So another reason is I want to be an astronaut. I actually applied to the astronaut program when I was just started working. NASA did not have the wisdom at the time to hire me as an astronaut, and but I haven't taken it to heart. I've worked in the nuclear industry and also in the aerospace industry for up to a total of 40 years of experience. So that's what I bring to the party. I like looking at the stars. I have a telescope. I don't use it very much anymore, but it inspires you to look up there, especially for people who are space nuts like me. Then there's the notion that you can save the world through science. What we have these days in our country, unfortunately, is an anti-science, anti-vaccination type movement that people are listening to. Anybody who has a math or science degree should be among the people who fight that off and try to convince people that that's not logical, that it's not correct. And there's also another motivation that usually that can hit you pretty good. So Ken, next slide. You do it for the money. Yes, sirree. Good old-fashioned greed. There is money in engineering. I have some data in the next couple of slides to convince that to yourself. So Ken, give me the next slide. Here's some statistics I got from the internet a couple of years ago. I think this is, 2019, last year. These are from the from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, got it from the net. They list college majors and what their early and mid-career median wages are. So you can see I've highlighted aerospace and all the engineering curriculums you usually see, and they start off in the $60,000 range. When I first started in engineering, I'm embarrassed to say that my very good salary right out of college was $10,800 a year. That puts me at about $5.40 an hour. So that was pretty good money back when I graduated from NYU. But by mid-career, most engineering curriculums are in the $100,000 range, the six-figure range. One interesting exception to that is over in the next column there, and that you see the pharmacy workers. They start off, this is the local pill pusher in the drugstore down the street. They start off pretty low, but they pretty much outstrip a lot of the engineering curriculums by mid-career. They're in the area of $115,000. So you can't take engineering, maybe you could be a pharmacist and wind up, if money is your motivation, then you have a chance of getting there. Next page is a similar collection of data. It shows an entire range from entry to median salary to top 10%, so like entry to end of career. By the time you get these same engineering curriculums to the engineering career, you're definitely in six-figure and $150,000 to $160,000 or $70,000, which is pretty good next to other occupations you could take. So you're doing good by choosing engineering, at least as far as the money goes. Next slide, Ken. So you ever want to poke at some poor answers, why I don't want to be a scientist or an engineer. Scientists or engineers are nerds. Well, folks, if you hear that from anybody, you can cry all the way to the bank about being a nerd, because you can tell them that they got no chance of coming up with the kind of money you can make being a scientist or engineer. For you ladies, my boyfriend won't like me if I'm too smart. I don't know how many of you get that kind of pressure, maybe not in those kind of words, but if I were you and you get a boyfriend that talks to you like that, I'd drop him like a hot rock. You deserve better. So don't let that don't let that keep you from being an engineer. I want to play football for the Rams. I don't want to be an engineer. I can point out at least one example where you can be both. There was back in the 60s and the 70s, there was a quarterback for the Cleveland Browns named Dr. Frank Ryan. He was also quarterback for the Washington Redskins. He has a PhD, or had a PhD from Rice University, 1965, in advanced mathematics. So the fact is that if you're smart enough, you can do both. Now, playing football makes you spend a lot of time out of classroom. You're going to need tutors, but it can be done. So keep on playing football and keep on playing, but be a scientist or an engineer also. Okay, Ken, next slide. Okay, so why did Bill want to be an engineer? I claim I was programmed by my parents, and I have some slides. When I have an older sister and a younger brother, but when it came to me and I got toys or Christmas gifts or Christmas presents, I got some of the science toys. Next slide, Ken. So I'm asking you guys, what did you get for Christmas or Hanukkah or your birthday? And this is what I got. Next slide, Ken. There they are. Actually, this is no kidding. I actually went online and found pictures of this kind of stuff. I didn't just get these kind of things. I had footballs and baseballs and basketballs and a lot of the other stuff. But I also got a chemistry set one year. And I remember when I got my chemistry set, I decided I would make iron soap. I mixed iron and iron filings, and I melted some soap, and I figured if I solidified it, I could make soap last longer. That was my genius project when I was a kid. Obviously, it didn't work too well, and I had to throw away a lot of soap and messed up with the iron filings, but I gave it a shot. I got a Kenner building set. That was a neat little item. It had little plastic girders and beams, and you put together a structure like you see there in the picture. Then you hung plastic panels on it, just like a glass panel building. And I used that to construct a launch, like a building. What's the one? The Launch Complex 39 down in Cape Canaveral, where they assemble space vehicles to their boosters. I built a building that looked just like that in a gantry, and even had a rollout a trailer that I put a little toy rocket on. So I had invented the Launch Complex 39 before it was ever built by NASA. So I figured they stole that idea from me. Another thing I had was simple Lincoln logs. They just put them together and look like houses, and you can invent anything you wanted. I had an erector set, which I used to create some of the launch gantry pieces on my Launch Complex 39 project, which I did with the Kenner building set. I had a microscope for a while, never got into that. Biology was my thing. But here's the one I remember most of all, a Remco rocket launcher. This is it's a cheap little plastic toy there. You can see there's like a fake radar screen in the middle, the little helicopter looking thing to the right. You wind it up and you launch it. And then you use this red looking thing on the left to shoot it down with a missile. So I was into that kind of stuff before I ever got to even the 4th grade. Those are the kind of toys I got, and I tested my parents led me in the direction that I ultimately wound up doing, which was engineering and science in aerospace and nuclear engineering. So that's my background. Next slide, Ken. Okay. I used the word genius a couple of times in the beginning of my talk. It has various definitions, but so I'm going to give you all who are listening a genius test. Let's see how many geniuses there are out there. Okay, so next slide, Ken. So what was the first name that popped into your head when you heard the word genius? Names of people who are who are famous in the history of science. What kind of a list could you make like that? Next slide, Ken. Here's my list. Albert Einstein, most everybody knows of him. Isaac Newton. Bill Gates is considered a genius because of what he did for Microsoft. Leonardo da Vinci, certainly on his own, invented so many things. it's mind-boggling. Steve Jobs is considered a genius for what he did for Microsoft again. Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, the original Greek thinkers. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was considered a musical genius. Sherlock Holmes, a fictional genius. George Washington Carver, a scientist of color who invented peanut butter and did a lot of stuff. And then the ever-present, the name everybody recognizes is Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory, the quintessential genius who lacks in social skills but gets by with it from being a genius. But who's missing from this list? Who is missing? Marconi, okay, that's a good thought. I see Sharma, is that your name? Yes, you could have him on there. But someone, let's see who's missing from my perspective. Women, there isn't a single woman on that list. If you want to go back one slide, take a look, and you won't find any women. And that's what I want to poke at a little bit. Next slide, Ken. Next slide. Okay, I went to NYU. It said in my resume, I got an alumni publication in the spring and summer of last year called Sex and Genius. It's an article in the alumni publication by Lindsay Van Gelden. And what this publication was about was the disturbing role that gender bias plays in how we perceive intellectual exceptionalism. A lot of fancy words, but the typical genius figure in our culture is generally male and white. We are at fault because of that. Andre Scipion, the NYU Associate Professor of Psychology. Yes, Edison, Thomas Alva, right. Good thought. That could be on the list too. But the work that Professor Scipion is doing suggests that the belief that only men can occupy the stratosphere of intelligence begins in childhood and is shared by adults of both genders. That's why I poked at what you got for Christmas from your parents. Your parents, wittingly or unwittingly, probably had some influence on you by giving you the right kind of toys or not the right kind of toys. Ladies, I hate to admit it, but you got dolls a lot and cooking utensils, fake cooking utensils and little games and like that. Whereas guys got, for the most part, those science toys I picked out. So I suggest that is a driving motivation, the programming you got for your parents. Finally, from Dr. Scipion, genius is often associated with untidiness, like little boys are untidy all the time. Their eccentricity, the rule flouting, obliviousness to everything but the creative task at hand. My mother used to have to shake me sometimes when I would trance out on a particular problem, or I'd listen to, there would be nothing else in my focus except this one thing. So she called me her little, I think she used the term rocket scientist, as a matter of fact. So she had a lot to say about what I did. Okay, next slide. So we missed women on the first list. So here's somebody that belongs on the list, Marie Curie. I understand they're doing there's one of the cable channels is doing a series on Marie Curie and her career. It's just started right now. You know that Marie Curie won 2 Nobel Prizes, not just one, but 2, one in physics and one in chemistry. She discovered a radioactive element and it ultimately led to her demise, but she is, the term Curie is still used in radiation discussions in science. It is a quanta of radioactivity. I point out that a woman named Lisa Randall, I was looking for a book to read about string theory and cosmology and quantum physics, and I wound up with this book titled Warp Passages by Lisa Randall. She's at least one time she was a professor of physics at MIT, so not and anybody who can teach this kind of stuff with some humor and some and deep understanding is a genius in my book. Einstein's first wife is sometimes considered smart herself. I believe she was believed to have helped Einstein with his math. Einstein wasn't particularly good at math. He had people like Max Planck and other people helping him, but his wife also helped him. And then the bum actually wound up divorcing her after a while. So he's not a genius that leads to other things. I list Hermione Granger, who you know is a character from Harry Potter. She's probably smarter than the two clowns she hung out with, Harry and Ron, put together, and she was certainly a better student than her. So I list her among my list of geniuses. Okay, Ken, next slide. She was very active in AIAA and an honorary fellow, and active in nominating women for fellow. Is that Lisa Randall? Is that who that was, Marilee? Didn't know that. Very good.
No, it was Yvonne Brill. She's an honorary fellow for AIAA. She's now deceased, but and I think any of our honorary fellows that are women should go on that list. Yvonne, she was also NAE, I believe, and she was very active in nominating other women for awards to, further the recognition of those women. So definitely on my list.
We can make a list of, we actually thought about it, if we refuse to be influenced by our heritage and our programming as to consider women as not being capable of intellectual exceptionalism. You could probably come up with 20 or 50 more names that I haven't listed here. Okay, so parting questions. What did you get for Christmas, ladies? Were you programmed by your parents to be a scientist? Did you get science toys? Or did you get the usual Barbie and cooking utensils toys? What did you get for Christmas, gentlemen? Did you reject the programming that your parents had given you by giving you all the science toys, and you just go for the football, baseball, basketball guys? So to an introspective question, how good or bad was your programming? Are you where you are today in science and engineering or not because of your parents? You might ask yourself that same question. Okay, next slide. I think it's the last one. So my advice to you is, if you want to take care of this problem of women not being treated fairly in the realm of science and engineering, buy your little sister, if you have one, or your sons and your daughters, a Remco rocket launcher. It worked on me. Maybe with those kind of efforts, we can fix the problem. Also, as a final thought, congratulations to Kamala Harris on achieving something exceptional for women of color and women in general. Yep. And that's the end of my little speech. I've been responding to questions on the screen. Anybody else want to poke me for anything else? Nothing. I've answered all your questions, and you're all going to go out and conquer the world. Well, good for you. I'm glad I could contribute to that. That's all I got, Ken.
A very thought-provoking talk, Bill. I hear you giving it earlier. For AIAA, I can see why they asked you to come back and do again. I think it's a very important topic, and things that we all should certainly think about. It goes into the unconscious bias, even though wanting to do the right things that all of us might be doing. So very good. Any other questions?
Yes, I think Tapa Sweeney raised her hand. She wants to speak
okay.
out.
Sure, let's have her ask the question.
Hello. I really loved what you were talking about and how you presented this topic. Do you think the advertisements that show that often some scientific toys or such belong to boys, and they often advertise dolls with girls and scientific toys with boys? So do you think this could have an impact on what is happening right now?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you're very impressionable when you're that old. You know, when you're in elementary school. I credit my success also to my female teachers, of which there were many growing up all the way through from grade school and into college and high school. There are lots of women that contributed to your decision to become a scientist or a mathematician or an engineer, and you don't even know about it. My wife was a teacher in elementary school for 25 years, and she would always tell me that you lose girls to science and math by the 4th grade. For some reason, and I've seen this in the classroom too, I've given speeches to elementary school students. Girls are usually better at math and science than boys are in the early grades. They show much more enthusiasm, but all of a sudden in the 4th or 5th grade, they start clamming up. Maybe they start, I don't know why that is. Perhaps the influence of boys on their life starts to enter into it. Maybe the programming that their parents have, the anti-programming that their parents gave them is finally taking effect. But she saw it in so many students. Girls would jump up and answer a question in school about math, where boys would just sit there and wonder why they had to be there. It seems to flip around. So I think any kind of programming you can do, positive, let your little sister play with if the little boy got a science toy, let the little sister have one herself, or at least play with the one that the boy got for Christmas. I think it can help.
Very good. Any other questions for Bill? I don't know if anyone has seen I don't know what station it's been running on, but there's a Pass It On, the Foundation for a Better World. There's a Pass It On commercial that talks about achievement, and it's a bunch of careers, right? So artistic and engineering, but I always notice that one because the person winning the ribbon at the science fair is a young girl, right? And so I love that ad. If you haven't seen it on TV, on the Pass It On website, they do have the commercials they show, and it's a nonprofit organization, you know, just highlighting values. It's not associated with any particular domination or anything, just associated with positive values. And it's a really great commercial for achievement, features women, young girls in scientists and stuff like that.
Right. When I went to, when I was an undergraduate, there was like 1 or 2 or 3 women in the whole collection of classes that I had. I also recall from one of the certificates I have is from UCLA. There's a hallway in the UCLA engineering building, and they have the pictures of the classes, the graduating classes of each year from like 1910 to present day. And if you look at it from that perspective, you can see there were no women initially. They gradually started showing up in World War II. And today they'll claim that, I think I talked to one guy who said that women are like, it's now closing in on 50-50 in most curriculums. So seems to be progress is being made, but it still hasn't been overwhelming. Is that me who's fantastic? I appreciate that. Whoever told me I was.
Yeah. You're getting lots of kudos, and Roz says her son is very interested to know other places you're going to be talking. So you definitely.
My fame spreads far and wide.
Yes, huh? yes. Getting very famous for this topic.
Yeah, I did it at UC Riverside first, and it was well received there. And then I did it again as a web. Yeah, I did it as a webinar, I think, once before, right, Ken?
Yeah, and also LMU.
All right, we did it at LMU, right?
Remember with Larry and Claire.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, the webinar was with the Dan Dunbacher. Remember the Dan Dunbacher?
Yeah, that's right. He was on there that time too. That's right.
Yeah.
Bill, can I be heard?
Yes.
Bill, you are fantastic. I
Thank you.
loved everything you said. It was actually just amazing. And my son, was like, oh, mom's doing this woman thing. But then he heard you. He caught on to it. And he was like, how do I meet this guy? He's amazing. He speaks my language. He's like, everything you described is exactly the way I would describe my son. My son's 24 and he's an inspector, but he left college because he was just like, I don't want to do the college thing. But
Really?
I was going, Michael, you need to be an engineer. You need to get back in it. Listen to this man, and my house is a jumbo science project. Just letting you know. I never know when I'm going to get blown up here.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it.
Thanks for everything, for doing this. You're really inspiring.
Quite welcome. Thank you.
Karen, do you have a comment or a question?
I'm sorry, I'm eating right now. So I didn't want to say it, but I typed some information about a man named Dale DeBoxy. I'm not sure if I pronounced his name right, but he writes a Women in Science column that often gets featured on Facebook on Women You Should Know. And he's written hundreds of articles about lots of different women. Many of them I've never heard of. That's fascinating. They go back quite a ways in history sometimes. And it's not just science. Sometimes it's engineers too, but there's a lot of women that I just never heard of. And I'm kind of fascinated by how
There
many.
you go. And I'm a victim of the same plot to shield me from knowledge about women in engineering. It's the society as a whole, Perhaps Kamala can do something about that.
Maybe.
Yeah. Karen, thanks for that. Thanks for that reference. I wasn't aware of it. That sounds very interesting. Definitely a reference we all could use. So thank you.
All right.
Any other comments, questions anybody has for Bill? We have a comment related to robotics. It's actually interesting, the comment Amanda has about robotics. They did find that to be true, that in some of the robotics teams that women weren't given full opportunity. And so VEX, the robotics group that does the VEX stuff, they've started having women-only teams, young girl-only teams, where they all can take a more equal part. And they've had actually competitions where every team that has come has been girls and young women. And so they're very focused on that for the reasons that Amanda put in her email message, where if you're not careful, and for those people that are leaders for like First Robotics or something like that, I think need to be very mindful of that, because you're right, nothing more discouraging than saying, okay, we'll do the building and you take the notes or do the design notes or something like that. So yeah. Some of that social bias you mentioned, Bill.
Before our educational system shut down, I was assisting at a class at a local elementary school on using drones. You can get educational drone packages that will give you a bunch of little drones you can program and then use inside to teach. One thing is you teach geometry, because you got to tell the drone how many degrees to turn to the right or left and do the appropriate programming. And the enthusiasm of kids in general was great for that class. In looking at the women who participated in it, the little girls, this was like a 6th grade class, they seemed to be trying not to compete with boys for the control of what the programming said. One boy would be really going like crazy, typing everything and probably making all decisions, whereas the girls would kind of let that happen and they wouldn't jump in for it. What we'd have to do for that is make the girls do the programming too, even if they're on a team. Make sure that they are learning about doing the specific work for programming the drones as opposed to being a partial or a second-class participant in the team.
Hey, Bill, we had a question about why you think women have been underappreciated as geniuses, and you referred to that study that Lindsay Gelder had done. Could you just chat a little bit more about that in terms of maybe some things she cited, like, you know, why would that happen where, you know, women are underappreciated? Because we do know, of course, that there are geniuses across every demographic and the ethnicity we have. So
yeah, I actually I saved a copy of the publication. I tried to characterize it by paraphrasing with what I did in one slide. I'm not sure I can go into it further than that without taking a look at it. If you'd like to give me an email address somehow, I could send you a copy of the article that I had. I had it available at UCR when I did this before, and I bought 10 copies with me, and they took all 10 copies plus my original, so I had to ask for an original back. So if you want me to do something about that, I can give me a list of emails. I can at least send you the article that I have, and you can have your own inferences, or call the guy in NYU. You know, I think he's still there, and get some firsthand knowledge about what kind of work he's doing in that area.
I mean, if you have the full citation from the paper and can find it and put it in the chat, you could do that as well too, and that will give people, you know, like the title author, if you know a year or something like that, that would certainly be helpful. Thank you.
I'll have to get some help. I've got to scan it first. I didn't scan it. I just, you know, sort of copied it, and then I could probably get it through Ken to whoever wants to take a look at it.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I was just thinking even just the title and the author's name again would be helpful, and where they're from. You know, people can look it up, I'm sure. Okay, just checking, see if there's anything else in chat.
Amanda's going to try and find it just by what info I have.
Okay, all right.
But I'll attempt to do something myself. At least get the article available, because it is it's public information.
Yeah. Oh, good. That would be good. Yep. Okay. Any other comments or questions that people have for Bill? We're making good time. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, but I think that's good because we've got a lot of things coming up. So I think that probably is actually a good thing. But I certainly don't want to turn off any questions if people have any for Bill on this subject matter. You could always raise your hand. Ken could unmute you if somebody would like to mention something.
This is Deborah Shepard. I'd just like to mention what I put in the chat box. There's an organization called actually it's Wonder Woman in Technology, and WWT, and they normally hold their convention in Long Beach the last 3 years, but their focus is on women of all diversity in terms of ethnicity, to get them into STEM careers. It's very much a mentoring, but they are holding it virtually this year, and it is free registration for students and teachers. So might be, and even the regular registration is about $49 for 3 days. So it's not much, but something. It's September 16th to 19th if anybody's interested in that.
Thanks, Deborah, for that. I'm sure there will be people that are interested. Thank you. Okay, why don't we turn it over to Ann Devereaux again from NASA JPL. You heard